In this story, an ambitious and brave knight is destined to die on the battlefield. He used to believe that someone like him, whose talents awakened, flourished, and took root on the battlefield, could start a new life. In that new life, he imagined he could finally start a family, something he desperately longed for. But unfortunately for him, it all turned out to be just an impossible dream. The knight kneeling before us is none other than the famous Argrik of the Drenchik Empire, the protagonist of our story. His final opponent is also a great knight who goes by the name of Duke Termion, one of the 6 knights, the 6 Exa-class knights of the Altion Empire. Even Argrik knows the weight of the challenge before him, especially since he has already felt the crushing pressure of the Black Wave after just one day on this battlefield. Duke Termion finds it fascinating that Argrik still stands against him. Despite knowing he's up against one of the 6 Exa-class knights, he even regrets that it would be a shame to end a budding talent like our hero. But Argrik is far from giving up. Defiantly, he swings his sword as he gets to his feet and makes it clear that he was born on the battlefield, and this is where he will die as well. The 2 contenders begin to walk toward each other, and the sheer aura they emanate sends the area into chaos. Duke Termion can't help but point out that although Argrik is being so brave, there is still a hint of regret in his eyes. The Duke goes on about how Argrik could have been a formidable rival for him in the future, but then he charges his sword with energy and lunges straight for our hero, with the Duke expressing hope that once he has a new life, he can leave his regrets behind. With that, the Duke wields his sword, but before Argrik kicks the bucket, he narrates that the war between the Drenchik Empire and the Altion Empire has lasted for many years. His mother and father were victims of this war, and he was just a newborn when she died due to the chaos around her, leaving him alone in this tumultuous world as an orphan. While other children played with toys and read books, he struggled to contribute to the war and fight for his kingdom. After turning 14, he had to take up the sword himself and was sent to his first battlefield. He fought bravely, and it was at this moment that his talents awakened. The manic core in his heart amplified his movements and senses to a level he never could have imagined. He began to rise through the knight's ranks and surprised everyone by mastering 3 mana forms and becoming a quad core with 4 cores. His dream of joining the 5 Exa-class knights of the Empire was within reach. He finally had the opportunity he had been desperately wishing for. He believed that this final war could finally bring him peace from his weary life. So he fought his last battle bravely, knowing he was on the verge of achieving everything he had ever dreamed of. That was until Duke Termion arrived on the scene, and his mere presence caused everyone to scatter. Back in the present, that first strike from the Duke's blow shatters Argrik's sword into pieces, and his dream was instantly shattered before his eyes. And the Duke's next blow pierced his heart, and he reflects on how all he ever wanted was to start a family, but he lost. The stab wound sends him flying across the battlefield, crashing hard against the ground. The impact shatters the earth beneath him as he slides, leaving him bloody and beaten as he begins to lose consciousness. Everything fades to absolute black, but the veil of darkness lifts the moment he opens his eyes. The first thing he sees is a husband and wife trying to play with him. Or rather, they're trying to play with their son, Argrix. He quickly starts to lose his composure once he hears them call him their son. His father swiftly picks him up and, with a wide smile on his face, calls him Dane. He tells him that he must become a fantastic lancer and follow in his father's footsteps. His mother, who goes by Dane Sogres, quickly snatches him from her husband's arms, insisting that he will become a fantastic assassin. The husband, Dane Sogres, and his wife argue about what career their son should pursue, while Argrix feels shy and confused by the dispute. Apparently, they are traveling in the carriage to their home and argue throughout their entire journey about the same thing. Lily believes that sneaking around in the dark to assassinate targets and disappearing without a trace is a much cooler path, while the father insists that the spear is the most beautiful and complete martial art. Well, that's just how it goes for our hero. Just when he thought he was done for on that battlefield, he miraculously ends up being reincarnated. The twist in his story is that he finds himself in the Altion Empire, his enemy, as the youngest son of a certain count. Once the carriage finally slows to a stop upon entering the mansion grounds, His parents reach a middle ground and decide they will teach him both skills, but Lily still hasn't given up and declares, annoyingly, that her son will become an assassin, while Arkan just laughs, insisting that Dane will become a coachman. The coachman shakes his head, signaling their arrival, and both parents are a bit confused that they're already there. I guess they must have lost track of time while arguing with each other. The husband quickly jumps out of the carriage and decides to help his wife down. He also extends his hand to her, and she gets a little embarrassed, asking what would happen if the castle staff saw them. He laughs and replies that he's just trying to hold his wife's hand, so why should that matter? With that, he escorts his beautiful wife out of the carriage, while Argrik can't help but feel awkward watching his father act like a simpleton. But, eventually, his awkwardness disappears as his eyes widen upon beholding the grandeur of the castle. Once they finally get inside, Lily can't help but notice how happy Dane seems to be back home. I mean, why wouldn't he be happy? With a house like this and parents this rich, it might be easier for his talents to spread their wings than he ever thought possible. 2 months have passed since that day, and we find Lily chatting with her son, who has started to babble. She is delighted that he's finally making sounds, while our boy is just as fascinated to experience this babbling firsthand, something he had never been able to hear before. You see, opportunities to meet young children were scarce during his time wandering the battlefield. The few children he did see were often wrapped in bandages, crying because they had nowhere to go, many mourning for their parents, who slowly succumbed to the destruction and faded away. So, compared to that, his new home is a fortunate and wealthy place, and he's relieved that he won't go hungry here at all. Suddenly, the father bursts through the door of the room, enthusiastically entering with a spear in hand. He proudly announces that this is called a spear. It seems our boy isn't a fan of his father's enthusiastic side, finding it hard to believe that this man is his father, who is the strongest EX-class spearman in the Empire, known as Dane Sogres, although he doesn't look like a war hero at all. In fact, he was a war hero known as the Blue Whirlwind. His wife gets angry and starts pushing him away from the child, asking how he could enter the child's room with something so sharp. The man starts to lose his cool under her intense gaze, and timidly, he says he just wanted to show it to Dane, but she's giving off a deadly vibe, reminding him that she told him not to teach their son anything until he reached an appropriate age. Well, it's not surprising that this grown man is trembling in fear under her piercing gaze, because his wife is the best assassin in the Moose Empire. Meanwhile, she argues that if he keeps this up, she's going to teach their son the basics of stealth while he's still young. Also, he tries to argue that everyone is doing early education these days. Even one of the famous houses of magic, known as the Teleportation House, places a staff next to a child the moment they're born, but his wife gets annoyed again and asks if the spear looks like a staff to him now. Meanwhile, our boy reflects and tells us that the reason his parents are placing so much importance on his future is that his 2 older sisters chose careers that have nothing to do with spear fighting or assassination. Midday arrives, and we see his 2 sisters playing with their younger brother, making him look like he has sore cheeks. One of his sisters, Arabella, laughs and says he looks even cuter now. Meanwhile, our boy narrates about Arabella and reveals that, due to her talent and magic, she has been on the path of a mage since she was little. At 12 years old, she was already a 3-chain class mage, and since the highest class for a mage is 9 chains, it means she's a genius who has already surpassed the entry level. Then, she asks her little brother if he wants to learn magic with her later, saying she's gotten bored of learning alone every day and would be happy to teach her little brother a thing or two. While Arabella is full of energy, her sister Claire is the complete opposite. Nervous and composed, she timidly says she can teach summoning, as it's a useful trick to have in his repertoire. Just like Arabella, Claire is a talented girl who excels at summoning. She made her first successful summon at 7 years old and can now handle 2 summons at once. Arabella then playfully tells Claire to touch him, insisting that he's very soft, but Claire seems wary of touching him, hesitating on whether she should. Meanwhile, Dane is acting all cute and friendly, and reflects on how at first he thought Claire didn't like him. Now, he realizes it's more that she's jealous because he's now the youngest in the family, stealing all the attention. Finally, Claire reaches out her hand and gently touches his nose. She gets excited and exclaims about how soft it really is. She touches it again and promises to teach him everything once he grows up. Dane can't help but find it a bit overwhelming how everyone wants to instill their own specialties in him. His father is a Class 6 Lancer, his mother is a talented assassin. Although retired and his older sister is a genius mage, then there's Claire, who is also a brilliant summoner. The Sogres Count house is the perfect noble family, the ideal family he always imagined. He wonders if it's really worth seeking revenge in this new life. Sure, his death was unfortunate, but that place was a battlefield. It's almost funny to think about taking revenge on someone who beat him fair and square. The whole family gathers in the living room, bickering amongst themselves and trying to convince each other how their specialties would be more suitable for Dane. Seeing this heartwarming chat between his family brings a smile to Dane's face, because this is the kind of family he has always wanted and he's happy to have been born here. But when things start to escalate and everyone starts getting angry with each other, he starts to doubt if this is what a harmonious family is really like. We then learn about the special ceremony that exists in the Sogres household, which is known as the choosing ceremony. You see, when a child is born into the family and turns 1-year-old, several objects are placed on a table in front of them, and people try to predict the child's future based on the object they grab. Since a year has passed, today it's young Master Dane's turn, as he has now turned 1, and he will choose his class. The gathered guests chat among themselves, pointing out how the young ladies became a mage and a summoner, and they wonder what young Master Dane will become. Choose. They decide to go to the ceremony hall to find out what Dane will choose. Once the guests gather in the grand hall, we see Dane sitting near 4 different objects, each belonging to a different class. As the crowd gathers around the table where Dane is sitting, his mother tells him he just needs to pick the one he likes. However, Dane doesn't seem too sure about what he should choose. He looks at his father, who is eagerly waiting for him to choose. Spear, his father smiles, thinking that little Dane will probably be drawn to the dragon tail spear. Apparently this spearhead is made of rare Dauren, and when it's imbued with mana, it becomes as sharp and heavy as the mana the user puts into it. On the other hand, his mother feels happy and proud, thinking that Dane is too handsome to become an assassin. Still, she's sure he'll end up choosing the dagger. This dagger isn't just any ordinary knife. It's called Nighthorn, and is made of ethereal ore that can hold all the elements of the world and store multiple different poisons. Just like his parents, Dane's sister is sure that he will become a great mage and that he will choose the bag to keep the mage's heritage alive. This bag is also a special subspace pouch, an item that can only be used by mages or those with magical talent. On the other hand, Claire, with her usual shy expression, wonders if Dane will call forth the object in front of him. It's actually a summoning sign, which is a summoner's tool. Summoners use this sign to receive a code based on their talent, allowing them to call their summons, but Dane feels quite confused and unsure about what to do, because he can literally hear the thoughts of his family members. Finally, he lets out a sigh and makes his final decision. He starts to crawl towards the objects, and the crowd's excitement builds with anticipation as he speeds up. His parents and siblings, they are absolutely delighted to see him move, cheering him on in their own way. His father tells him to choose something sturdy, while his mother encourages him to choose something short and sharp. As he gets closer, a yellow light begins to shine from all the items arranged on the table. Dane has no idea what's happening, and his family is just as lost. On the other hand, the crowd smiles and gets excited, just as surprised when they realize that all 4 objects reacted, which is unheard of. They can't help but admit that the young master seems to be a generational genius after all. Meanwhile, Dane is just as bewildered by the situation. He remembers how he was a talented soldier on the battlefield, but in this life he feels he's on a whole other level. Little Labella curiously asks her father what they should do, since this has never happened before, but both her father and mother seem just as lost, realizing that this means they have to teach him all 4 elements. Of course, this surprises the other 2 ladies, while Dane just smiles cordially in response. Time passes, and we find ourselves in the training hall where we can hear the clash of weapons. It turns out to be none other than Dane and his father. From the looks of it, our boy has grown a lot since we last saw him, which was about 30 seconds ago, if I'm not mistaken. Arkin shows his son a wide smile for his good results, as Dane has perfected the technique he taught him earlier. The boy thanks his father, and we learn that Dane is now 7 years old. As they share an amused laugh, a man suddenly appears on the scene. Dane looks at him curiously, and we see that the man is presenting a spear. It seems Arkin was clearly waiting for the spear to arrive, and he quickly grabs it and offers it to Dane, telling him this is his birthday present. He explains that he was originally going to give it to him during the birthday banquet, but he wanted to give it to him before his mom's gift. Arkin further explains that he has been preparing the spear for 2 years, and that it was specially commissioned from a renowned craftsman in the capital. He then wishes him a happy 7th birthday in advance, and our boy eagerly drops his old stick and grabs the spear from his father, saying that he will use it because it's just so cool. He is really enjoying how the black handle and the silver tip look together, and on top of that, it's surprisingly light. His father asks him if he likes it, and he replies that he loves it. In fact, he's so excited that he already starts messing around with it. Then, his father asks him if he knows the difference between a sword and a spear. Dane explains that with the spear's length, you can keep opponents at a distance, and because of its small point of contact, it has a high attack efficiency. His father agrees, saying that's true, but he warns him that as he gets stronger, it will actually be harder to use than a sword. He points out the fundamental problem with spears. For the attack, you need a minimum distance between you and your opponent, but he tells him not to worry too much about it, since every weapon has its advantages, and he explains that even swords, which are often called the perfect weapon, can be weak in certain situations. The son perks up at this, saying he'll keep it in mind. Then, the father starts spinning the spear in his hand and invites his son to a spar to show him something. Dane is absolutely amazed to see the power radiating from his father. It's the first time he's witnessed the incredible flow of power from an Exa-class spearman and the magical energy his dad is emitting. It's simply overwhelming. After charging up, the father quickly thrusts the spear forward, and the space around the tip begins to distort. He explains that the reason for the distortion is that he released his magical power while thrusting the spear. This technique uses the core's characteristic, which concentrates magical power in one spot. The son mentions he's heard about this from his sister and explains that humans can surpass their physical abilities as the number of cores increases. It means their limits can be pushed. He reflects on how, in his past, he had a 4-core processor, and all this knowledge he has now is from his previous life. Meanwhile, his father starts to smile widely, thinking about how well his son has been studying, and reminds him that he now has 6 mana cores. Of course, our boy pretends to be surprised, but inside, he thinks about how, if he hadn't died, he could have achieved 6 cores too. Then his father encourages him to try his new spear. Dane looks a bit doubtful, but his father tells him to just relax his mind, forget his worries, and thrust the spear. The son agrees, and, while holding the spear, reflects on how in his past life he had no interest in spears. After realizing his talent for swordsmanship, he had only used spears as a secondary option, but now it's finally time to try. After getting into his stance, he closes his eyes. While his father reflects on how good his stance is, he can't help but smile from ear to ear because it took him 7 years to master this technique, but since his son is still so young, he wonders if he can even pull it off. But as soon as Dane thrusts the spear, reality shatters, completely subverting his father's expectations. He genuinely didn't expect this miracle to happen. He freaks out and starts shouting, asking his son how he knows so much. Once Dane finishes performing the technique, the man approaches his son laughing and saying he did an impressive job. Dane explains that the moment he thrust the spear, he gathered magical power in one spot and infused it into the tip of the spear. When the magical power reached the spear's tip, he cut off its flow. The father goes crazy when he hears this and asks if he has formed a mana core. Dane answers yes, revealing that while reading a book about creating mana cores, he decided to try it, and luckily, he was able to succeed. But, of course, he's lying, because the truth is he formed it while practicing mana breathing. The father kneels down to get on his son's eye level, unable to help feeling proud. He's sure that one day his son will become an extraordinary warrior. Dane just cracks a smile as he thinks to himself about all the surprises he has in store for the future, which will surely surprise his father. Meanwhile, the father wonders if his son will actually become a mage, a lancer, an assassin, and a summoner at the same time. As night falls, Dean's 7th birthday finally begins. The guests are gathering in the castle, and the hall is filled with music and the bustle of laughter. Everyone is having the time of their lives. Duke Bot, the same guy who killed our boy in his past life, is also attending the party. Once he sees Arkin, he calls him over to catch up. Arkin addresses him by his title of Duke, but Bout tells him to drop the formality and just speak as he normally does. As we know, Bout is from the greatest house in the Alchian Empire and the head of the Termion Duchy. Arkin quickly leans into his friend and whispers that many people are watching them. So he needs to keep up the act of formality. The Duke tells him to do as he pleases and asks where his son is. That's when Arkin calls over Dane and tells him to greet Duke Termion. As soon as he hears the mention of Duke Termion, Dane's mind flashes back to the past, where he had his last encounter with this man. Once our boy finally appears before the Duke, he introduces himself as Dane Sogres and bows his head, saying it's an honor to meet him. The Duke laughs, impressed by the boy's manners, and asks his father if Dane is also learning to use a lance, to which Arkin replies that he is. At that moment, a little lady approaches Duke Bot from behind, and when Dane's eyes land on her, he is taken aback for a moment. The girl promptly greets the Count of Sogres, bowing her head to show her good manners. She introduces herself as Layla Termion, the youngest daughter of the Termion Duchy. After this encounter, the celebration continued, the guests enjoying the music and the beautiful evening. But the same couldn't be said for Arkin Sogres and Bouth Termion, all because Baroness Termion was still ill, and despite Bouth's best efforts to find a cure or a method to heal her, nothing worked. No, Arkin hoped this was all just a temporary trial, and that his friend's wife would get better soon. But still, Bouth warned him that if he suddenly disappeared, it would mean his wife was feeling worse, and he had used a teleportation scroll to return to the capital. Anyway, today is a party for Dine, who had just disappeared somewhere, to Bout. He seemed like a rather resourceful boy, and he wanted to talk to him a bit more. Arkin also didn't know where his son was and noticed that Miss Layla had disappeared with him. Finding them turned out to be quite easy. The two of them had gone for a walk together, probably not liking this boring party just like dozens of others. But what the two of them were talking about was a mystery to their parents. In private, Layla was very talkative, and to be honest, she didn't like following her father to all these noble parties. But this time, she was glad she came. Layla had heard a lot about how handsome Dane was, but he looked even better now in the moonlight, and she liked this place. Dane was happy to hear that she liked it here, unlike the capital. The Sogres family's territory was a nice and quiet place, which is why Layla envied him. At her house, something is always going on. Nobles come every day with matters and offers for her father. Sometimes even the imperial family shows up. And the most annoying part is that every time someone comes over, she has to dress up formally and go out to greet them. That is exactly what she hates. Instead of all that, she would like to wear something practical and simple and practice with her sword all day. He was surprised that such a small and seemingly harmless girl was practicing with a sword and not magic. He himself loved his quiet territory. It wasn't as lively as the capital, and it gave him a lot of free time to practice with his spear, which he loves. At first, Layla was surprised that he was using a spear, but then she remembered his father's nickname and everything clicked. She had heard many times from her father how incredible Blue Whirlwind was. And since Dane is practicing so much with the spear, it means he also wants to join the academy. However, that wasn't the reason why Dane was practicing with the spear. Layla was surprised by this answer. To her, practicing hard to get into the academy was an obvious choice. She had heard that just getting in was incredibly difficult. Well, Dane didn't really doubt that he was going to get in and was just practicing because he wanted to be even better. After getting into the academy, Layla couldn't believe his confidence, so she asked him what he would do if he didn't manage to get in. Well, even in that case, our hero wasn't going to get upset and give up. Instead, he would simply try again. And if even with the second attempt it didn't work, he would take it as a sign that it was not his path. Layla just couldn't believe such a casual attitude toward the tough future, so she asked if he was afraid of upsetting his family and household. And of course, our hero wasn't worried. Compared to the trials of his past life, it was nothing. Layla, on the other hand, could only envy him. Her household considers failure to be unacceptable, even though Dane had lived surrounded by nobles for 7 years. He was still surprised by how petty the nobles were for worrying about such things. As for Layla, he had no doubt that she would succeed. When she heard the words of encouragement, she just lit up and gladly offered to let Dane watch her swordsmanship skills. Our hero was a little surprised by such enthusiasm, but it was impossible to stop her. When the opportunity to practice with a sword appeared on the horizon, Lila immediately asked where the training ground was, and Dane had to accompany her, hoping that nothing would happen there. On the training ground, Layla didn't hold back. She performed move after move like an experienced swordswoman. To a beginner's eye, her movements might have seemed perfect, but our hero was far from a beginner. Watching her movements, he had to admit that her transition from attack to defense and back to attack flowed very smoothly. And the timing of her attacks was excellent. But there was one thing. After a while, her movements fell out of rhythm and lost their fluidity. Out of breath after the exercise, a satisfied Layla asked him what he thought of her moves. At first, Dane wasn't very honest and said that she performed fantastically and that he enjoyed watching. Layla was quite happy with this achievement, but Dane decided to be honest with her. He noted that she still had room for improvement. For example, after the third form, Layla was taking half a step more than necessary. And then it happened again. With the subsequent forms, these repeated extra steps made the later sword forms feel slightly misaligned. Such criticism left Layla speechless. She looked like she was about to cry, and Dane was starting to think that such criticism was too direct for her. He even started to apologize for bothering her and even said that maybe he was wrong. Because he had seen a swordsman handle the sword a long time ago, but he hadn't given it much thought. Layla quickly regained control of herself and gripped the sword more tightly. Now she realized her mistake. Now she began to repeat the training movements again, and this time they were perfect. Dane's advice was exactly the missing piece of the puzzle she needed for perfection. Her joy and gratitude knew no bounds. She even hugged Dane. Our hero tried to resist, but it didn't work out so well. Layla was simply fascinated by how much he knew about swordsmanship. In an instant, he noticed what she had been doing wrong all this time and what her masters hadn't told her. She promised she would remember his help. She finally let Dane go, after almost crushing him in her hug, but then she nearly cut him with her sword. That little lady really needs to learn some self-control. Dane was surprised by such a sudden hug, but you couldn't say he didn't like it, of course. Their moment of privacy was soon interrupted by the shouts of the servants who were looking for them everywhere. They had rested enough from the banquet and weren't going to hide, so they hurried back so they wouldn't be found on the training grounds. When they arrived, Dane was the center of attention. As his parents officially congratulated him on his birthday and the discovery of his first manticore. And of course, they gave him a gift. It was a brooch with the family crest, similar to the ones his older sisters had. His mother advised him to cherish the gift, as this brooch would now serve as proof of his status and honor. After his parents, all the guests joined in the congratulations. Dane had now officially and truly earned the name of Sogres, and no one present doubted that he would grow up to be a fine man like his father. Dane's parents were very happy, as was little Dane, since it was the first time in his 2 lives that he had received so many warm congratulations from so many people. Suddenly, the entire hall trembled. The guests began to scream and panic, thinking it was an earthquake or an enemy invasion. Dane also began to worry, but his father quickly reassured him, telling him there was nothing to be scared of. Argrik Sogres knew very well what was happening, although he had hoped today would be a quiet day. Apparently his daughter didn't listen to him. Dane didn't really know that lightning appeared near the very ceiling of the hall, and in a split second, a portal appeared above the frightened guests. There was no end to the guests' bewilderment when a small figure came flying out of that portal, who was apparently laughing at the laws of physics and landed on the ground without any problem at all. It was Dane's older sister, Arabella, and in her opinion, she wasn't late at all. The guests still couldn't close their mouths in amazement. Surprised that such a young woman could already use teleportation magic, normally, to open even a small portal, One had to reach at least 5 chains. Dane didn't admire her power at all, but was rather annoyed by how loud and flashy she was. But just as the guests calmed down a bit, a huge monster appeared in the sky. A large wyvern with a rider. It seems that this time, Lady Claire scared the guests. She was in a bad mood. However, she was just one step too late to get ahead of her sister. Upon entering, the guests around her started talking about how they had heard she was a brilliant summoner, but no one expected her to control a wyvern at the age of 16. Finally, they were home again, and together they stood before their parents and brother to wish a very happy birthday to their favorite little brother, Dane. After both flashy entrances, Dane's sisters hurriedly handed him their respective gifts while wishing their little brother a happy second birthday. He thanked Arabella and Claire for coming back home, even though they were busy with their studies. The girls were excited to see their little brother open the gifts. Duke Arkin almost shed a tear over the preferential treatment his son was receiving. After all, his daughters only gave him one letter for his birthday. Dane opened the box that Arabella handed him, and inside was a ring that transformed into a convenient dimensional bag. She designed the artifact herself. The subspace magic used in its creation belonged to the highest tier. Arabella's esteemed professor applied it to the ring. It's common knowledge how difficult it is to imbue subspace magic into any object. Arabella took the ring and lovingly took her brother's hand to put it on him. She must have spent a lot of time designing an artifact capable of supporting an entire subspace. She also applied Dane's genetic code to the ring so that no one else could use it except her little brother. It's a one-of-a-kind item. Mom Lily examined the ring and saw a small ripple of mana running around the artifact, which meant it was made using the highest quality of magic stones. Arabella explained that all Dane had to do was imbue a little mana into the ring and the subspace would be established. It is much more convenient than normal dimensional bags. That fact alone made this priceless. As far as Dane could remember, these types of tools were something that only the wealthy used on the battlefield. Only commanders of noble birth and high-ranking sorcerers wielded such a convenient power. The ring would also grow as he aged, adapting to his body. Dane tried to imbue his mana into the artifact, and a green portal opened in front of him. Everyone, Duke Arkin included, was surprised to see his son do it with such ease. Claire, Duke, Termion, and Layla were amazed by the radiant display of magic. Dane managed to open a subspace faster than Arabella had done years ago. He was a genius, no doubt about it. It would be a groundbreaking achievement if he managed to cultivate both a mana core and a magician's circle at the same time. After the magic demonstration, Claire approached her little brother and handed him her gift. Dane slowly opened the present while sincerely thanking his older sister. Inside the wooden box was a peculiar-looking egg on a soft cloth. Confused, he picked up the egg and asked what it was. Claire got scared and warned him to be careful with it, since it was no ordinary egg. Everyone in the family was also curious about what this strange object was. Gift, but Claire only revealed it to Dane. She whispered that it was a familiar she got by accident while trying to summon from Karen. Claire herself doesn't know what will come out of it, but everyone knows how valuable a familiar can be. Dane tried to imagine what this strange egg could yield. He had heard of familiars before. Unlike summons, they are a completely different entity. A familiar, once summoned, can remain permanently in the real world. Claire stated that Dane should keep this egg a secret until it hatches in the future. He promised he would. All the whispering between the two irritated Arabella, who felt left out. As for Claire's instructions, Dane must make sure to pour his mana into the egg once in the morning and once at night so it would recognize him as its master. Lily was happy that her little son received such incredible gifts. This showed how much her children cared for one another. With the gift giving over, Duke Arkin cleared his throat and reminded his daughters to at least say hello to their parents, since they had appeared at the party after saying they might not be able to attend. Realizing they hadn't said a word to their parents since their arrival, the girls greeted their father awkwardly. Duke Arkin was a big softy when it came to his children, so he didn't really mind. He was just happy to see his girls again. Since they left to pursue their professions, the girls rarely returned home, so Duke Arkin was glad to see them healthy. Layla watched the Sogres family being so lovingly loud and jovial with each other. In her 20-somethings, The girl couldn't help but compare her own home situation with theirs. Dane noticed her watching them and turned his head, noticing the drop in her mood as she silently walked away. He wondered why she looked so lonely and sad in the middle of a lively crowd of nobles. The party ended, and the next day arrived. Duke Termion stayed the night and was now walking through the Sogres territory. He couldn't help but think about how incredibly talented Arabella Sogres was, as expected of the best mage in the academy. Her talent in the magical arts was second to none. The girl could be the perfect match for Duke Termion's son, the best swordsman in the academy. If House Sogres and House Termion could be united through a marriage between those two, it would give rise to a faction that could rival even the imperial family. If that happened, no one would be able to mess with both houses and their children. So Duke Termion decided to bring up the topic of an engagement between their eldest children in his conversation with Arkin today. On his way to meet the other Duke, Termion heard the sound of steel nearby. It came from the training ground, so someone must be honing their technique inside incredibly early in the morning. Of course, it was Dane, polishing his spear skills with the utmost focus. He had become quite deadly with a weapon. With years of training with his father and his incredible work ethic, he had long been ready for combat. Dane's concentration was unparalleled. He moved with the fluidity and sharpness of a veteran warrior, flying across the battlefield as he executed multiple kills. The force of his strikes increased, his speed even more, and raised the intensity to a higher level. Finally, his arms became a blur as he launched countless spear thrusts in a short period of time. Curiosity got the better of Duke Termion, and he ended up spying on the boy's training from afar. He was pleasantly surprised to see the youngest son of House Sogres training with everything he had. With his experience, he could discern how incredibly polished Dane's technique was. His movements and concentration didn't seem like those of a 7-year-old boy at all. Even his simple thrusts were refined to a frightening degree. Everything was executed with such a level of perfection that spearmen who have been on the battlefield for years could still learn from him. And when Dane finally finished his last sequence, he was panting and gasping, trying to catch his breath. Duke Termion was completely impressed from beginning to end. What he had just witnessed seemed impossible. He had heard rumors about the young Sogres showing incredible talent, even when he was just a baby, but he always thought they were just exaggerated rumors. Now he knew those rumors were true. After a short break, Dane went back to practicing, this time focusing on his movement and footwork, being one of the strongest swordsmen in the country. Duke Termion couldn't help but notice that the boy's stance and footwork looked similar to those of a fencing master. The Duke began to consider that the boy might have even reached a high level of swordsmanship at such a young age. Finally, Dane noticed that someone was watching him from the entrance. He gripped his spear, ready to attack, as he warned the lurker to come out instead of hiding. Duke Termion got too excited and ended up being detected by a child. It wasn't his proudest moment as an expert warrior. The more he thought about Dane's movements, the more strangely familiar they seemed. He was sure he had seen that same footwork somewhere before. The Duke had to reveal himself and apologize to Dane for spying on his private training session. He insisted that he wasn't trying to do anything suspicious. Seeing that the spy was Duke Termion, Dane felt bad for having spoken out of turn. Although he had been living in his current body for 7 years, this man was still the one who had defeated and killed him in his previous life. Remembering his etiquette training, Dane Sogres formally greeted the Duke. Duke Termion confessed that he was fascinated by the sight of the Rising Star's morning training and apologized once more. The boy held his own well, replying that he was forgiven. The Duke was amused by his bravery to speak as if they were equals. Now that he had a closer look at Dane, he noticed that the boy's body didn't even show signs of fatigue or trembling, despite such intense training. When he was his age, he hadn't even made a manticore. The Duke pointed out Dane's excellent stabbing attack, observing that the boy had inherited Arkin's talent with the spear. The spear itself was also very well made. Dane formally thanked the Duke for acknowledging his technique, and the old man smiled. Not only was this boy a lethal soldier, but he also knew what to say at any given moment. In comparison, his own son didn't have such excellent skills and manners when he was 7 years old. This little detour made Duke Termion consider arranging a marriage between Layla and Dane as well. So he cunningly interjected by saying that his daughter had also been training her swordsmanship, suggested that since they were of similar age, they should look after each other once they entered the academy in the future. Dane continued to respond instantly. The Duke liked the young man's frankness. Finally, the Duke. Termion excused himself so as not to interrupt Dane's training any further, but before leaving the training hall, he had a curious question he wanted answered. He wanted to know if the boy had ever trained in swordsmanship as well. Dane made a mistake in front of the Duke. His old habits must have slipped out without him realizing, given Duke Termion's sharp gaze. It is not surprising that he recognized the minuscule habits at a glance. Dane replied that he had just read some textbooks on basic swordsmanship, but had never received formal training in it. The Duke still found it strange that he felt something like a raw battlefield sense from the boy. But common sense dictates that an inexperienced child could not have that killing intent. At last, the Duke finally stood up and said his goodbyes, and Dane saw him off. Duke Termion also extended an invitation for him to visit if he ever came to the capital in the future. The swordsman had taken a personal interest in Dane's talents. Dane wondered if the man still remembered him. Just the thought of defeating someone who ended his life before already made his blood boil if he established a solid foundation and prepared step by step. He was sure he could surpass the Duke. One of his goals is to defeat the powerful Duke Termion in this life. Continuing his training, Dane lost track of time, and Hernan, the assistant, had to come look for him. He was always watching the boy from the shadows, always ready to attend to his needs, given Hernan's faint presence. Dane thought this guy might have enough talent to learn assassination and stealth skills. Today, everyone had been very busy preparing for the second banquet. Some of the nobles had already started arriving at their location. It was difficult to gather more than 30 noble families to arrive on the exact date. As for Dane's sisters, they had already opened a teleportation portal and returned to the academy together. It could not be helped since they had midterms soon. For now, it was time for Dane to get cleaned up and ready as well. He made a mental note to take a closer look at the gifts his sisters gave him last night. After his intense training, Dane was attended to and dressed. He went up and entered the family hall with his mom and dad and mingled with various nobles. He had to put his etiquette training into practice all night while socializing with high society. He was paraded around as the birthday boy. All the attention was on him. Finally, he managed to get out of the banquet hall and take a breath. The life of a noble was exhausting. For one, his schedule was more packed than usual as the birthday boy. But at least he could always find solace resting in his beautiful garden. Mr. Garner had worked hard to beautifully cultivate this special place, the kind of beauty that offers peace. Dane looked at the flowers in full bloom, bursting with their unique colors as butterflies danced around. He remembered his older sister scolding him about how flowers contain the most mana in nature. Since he had some time to kill, he might as well try to analyze the mana in these flowers. Dane closed his eyes and focused on the natural flow of magic in the air. Without opening them, he began to grasp the concept his sister explained to him. He started to feel the mana in the flowers. He had been training in multiple fields at once, but he hadn't seen any notable development in wizard magic and summoning magic. He was having a hard time choosing which fields to dedicate his time to. Having too many talents could be problematic at times like this. This bro was literally suffering from success. After spending a few minutes immersed in the natural mana of the garden, he finally saw the mana in the flowers. He couldn't believe that something so small could contain such a massive flow of mana. If one can feel the flow of nature and somehow make it their own, the principle could settle in the body to form a magic circle. That is precisely what is happening now. It helped a lot that his body's affinity for mana had always been tremendous. He could clearly see something that others could only vaguely feel with their sixth sense. Just one trip to the garden had improved his mana perception by a ton. What he could only vaguely see before had become clearer. He was so close to understanding the inner workings of magic when he felt something snap. Meanwhile, 2 noble children had also found their way into the garden, bored with the adults' talk in the banquet hall. They were brothers. The older redhead was annoyed because no one was paying attention to him while everyone was talking about the child prodigy Sogres, and he walked aggressively over the flower bed, destroying them in the process. The redhead brothers had gotten lost in the immense garden and saw Dane standing there, dazed. They sized up his clothes and mistakenly thought Dane must be a servant and yelled at him. He didn't take this disrespect very well. The brat, the bastard, dared to order him to take him and his brother to the exit. Dane saw what they were doing to the flowers and yelled at them to stop trampling the plants. The red-headed bastard had the nerve to be offended for being yelled at. Dane asked why they were ruining the flower garden instead of using the garden paths. The red-headed bastard saw he was small and continued to act obnoxiously. Then came the flaunting of his family name, as all noble brats do. Dane didn't care. However, to him, they just looked like a couple of brutes ruining his garden's flower bed. The red-headed bastard didn't like being called a brute, but he acted like one and grabbed Dane by the collar. He and his brother were the sons of Count Tyron, a guest of the castle. Hearing Count Tyron's name reminded Dane of a memory from his previous life. That guy was the noble he captured after a shameful defeat on the battlefield. He remembered Count Tyron as an irritating noble, one of those horrible bastards, based on the behavior of the brute in front of him right now. The phrase like father, like son, seemed perfect. Red Buster kept showing off his family name, boasting that they were famous in the capital. He even bragged that his family could make Dane disappear without a trace. So Dane had better be careful what he said. I'd met plenty of idiots like this kid before, my instincts told me. I knew words wouldn't get through the red bastard's thick, air-filled skull. The guy raised his fist, lunging at Dane while still thinking he was just bullying some random nobody. However, Dane wasn't going to let that happen. He responded by headbutting the red bastard's nose with all his might. It was a critical hit that almost flattened the red bastard. Laughter. The younger brother worriedly called out to his older brother. He checked on the red bastard who had collapsed on the ground after taking a heavy blow. Wiping his nose, he saw blood and started to panic, as if he'd never bled before. When he saw the red on his hand, the red bastard's blood boiled and he threatened to kill Dane. Finding the threat amusing, our boy stood his ground and challenged the brat to go ahead and try. The red bastard wanted blood for blood. His little brother had some common sense and wanted to stop his older brother. But the red bastard was too arrogant to be stopped. The brute threw a punch forward and Dane nonchalantly dodged it, leaping backward. It was a mismatch from start to finish. Dane was too elusive for an amateur. While letting the red bastard tire himself out, he observed that the brat's footwork was too sloppy, as if he had never held a weapon in his life. Dane considered that the bastard might be a mage or a summoner. The flurry of punches continued. None of them even came close to touching a single hair on Dane. The red bastard's nose was still bleeding as his patience wore thin. Dane continued to toy with his enemy using his superior footwork, and an idea came to his mind. Maybe he could harness the flow of magic he saw in the flower earlier and incorporate his will into it. If he succeeded, he should be able to compress that force into a physical form. He could take this opportunity to test it in combat. The bastard's little brother watched from the sidelines with his mouth agape. Dane planted his feet on the ground and began to accumulate magic in his hands. He visualized a ball of pure mana and fired it at the brat's stomach. The force was powerful enough to send the red bastard flying painfully onto the lawn, making a mess on the concrete along the way. He screamed in agony with his body and ego bruised. The little brother checked on his loser big brother, who was now lying in the flower bed. Dane was more worried about the flower bed he had just ruined than the bastard's well-being. But the red bastard was tenacious. He still had enough energy to get up. Since Dane could use magic, the red bastard demanded to know who Dane was. The little brother continued trying to dissuade his older brother to no avail. His pride was too wounded to care about consequences or trouble. The red bastard summoned the mana within his body and began to open some kind of insidious portal. Just then, Dane was surprised to see the familiar sight. This type of magic belonged to summoners. The mana swirled and merged until a translucent wolf began to descend to the ground. The wolf looked bloodthirsty and predatory with its sharp fangs. The red bastard laughed maniacally as he called forth his summon named Game Poo. He finally introduced himself as Duke Termion, ready to show Dane the consequences of messing with someone of his stature. Dane heard the brat order the wolf to tear him to pieces, but he wasn't impressed by the mere wolf. The summon certainly felt lackluster, since he had gotten used to seeing his sister Claire summon fearsome beasts like her wyvern. Digron stood at a distance as Gempu lunged at him. He just looked the wolf in the eyes and didn't move. Jempu must have sensed that it would suffer a horrible fate if it dared to continue the attack, so the wolf turned around, spinning 180 degrees. As it turned, its aura visibly changed, as if the aggression towards Dane had completely dissipated. The Tyron brothers were dumbfounded. Degron's pride, his summon, had apparently turned against him. Right now, the big pup was behaving as if it were submissive to Dane. Degron yelled at his summon to tear out Dane's throat and end his life, but the orders fell on deaf ears. In response, the pup started wagging its tail happily at Dane, and sensing no ill intent from the summoned beast, Dane petted it. He remembered that even the wyvern played with him sometimes. At that moment, he simply thought it was due to his blood ties with his sister, but in a situation like this, where there was no family connection, the summoned beast still behaved in a friendly manner. This could mean he had an unusually high affinity towards all kinds of summoned beasts, or Jempu's favorability towards its original summoner had hit rock bottom. Degron couldn't understand what was happening. He had never heard of a summon betraying its master. Dane was simply winning on all fronts and continued to provoke Degron to face him. The little brother was practically begging his older brother to stop embarrassing himself and accept defeat. To no avail, pathetic Degron still wanted to fight, but the little brother really needed this fight to be over. The poor kid, caught up in his brother's foolishness, had wet his pants out of fear. "Lil!" The brother cried, and Dagron cursed him for being an embarrassment. Dane rubbed salt in the wound to his pride by pointing out the bathhouse in the main castle's basement. Dagron used his little brother's accident to slip away, as if he hadn't made a big enough fool of himself already. He ordered Dane to stay in the garden. Dane just looked at the pathetic loser with disgust. Degron didn't even take his summon with him. Our boy continued to hang out in the garden, experimenting with his new understanding of mana. He tried to practice a trick Claire had taught him before, identifying what was left of the faint bond between that bastard, Degron, and Jempu. He severed that thing and carefully overwrote the bond with his own magic. By doing so, he and the wolf were officially connected. A boy who had never done anything like a proper summoning managed to pull off the intricate trick just by taking advantage of his high favorability with summoned beasts. He had now officially succeeded as a summoner. While basking in the glory of his success, Dane heard a familiarly annoying voice that seemed to be looking for him. Degron Tyron, the bastard brat, actually called his dad and tattled that he was bullied by a boy in the garden, pointing at Dane. The coward plugged his nostrils to stop the bleeding while complaining to his dad that Dane had hit him and had severed the bond with his summon. Just then, the big guy Mogar Tyron stepped forward and introduced himself as the head of the Count Tyron, one of the great nobles of the capital. He eagerly asked if Dane really messed up his son's face and forcibly stole his summon. Our boy wasn't one to back down from a pig, so he stood his ground and owned up to what he did. He noticed that Mogart Tyron now looked much fatter than when he captured the pig as a prisoner. Peacetime must be treating him very well. Although he was a disgrace on the battlefield, Mogart continued to boast while claiming he couldn't let this matter slide. Messing with his children was something he couldn't overlook. The pig continued his barrage of demanding questions and finally asked the boy to reveal his identity. Our boy proudly raised his head and formally introduced himself as Daenerys, the youngest son of Dane Sogres, the Lord of the South and head of the Count Sogres family. The boy gave them that Game of Thrones style introduction. This introduction left the low-class father-son duo stunned. Unknowingly, they had offended the birthday boy, not realizing they were messing with the famous rising star of the South. The Count is quite baffled by this encounter, unexpectedly with the youngest son of the House of Sogres. Speaking of great noble houses, he remembers how he was taken prisoner by that guy, Argrik, and made no significant contribution to the war, leaving all the great nobles laughing at him. At this moment, he sees this as a perfect opportunity to maneuver the situation in his favor, intending to ruin the name of Count Sogres and use that as a pretext to demand mining rights. The nobles who once looked down on him will soon be bowing before him. With that in mind, the big-brained fatty turns to our boy, asking if he's the birthday boy. Dane, my dude, just nods in response and positively confirms it. The fatty barely contains his frustration, because he definitely didn't come here to celebrate some brat's birthday. He then points to his crappy son, Digron, and asks Dane how he plans to compensate for the humiliation he caused his son. Not only did Dane injure his son, who is a guest of Sogres, but he also stole his summon, which is a serious crime. The crappy son also agrees with his father, who is just as crappy, telling Dane that this is his last day. The fat guy then also threatens our boy, stating that he's going to speak personally with Count Sogres and hold him responsible for his actions. Dane simply acknowledges what the fat guy is saying, and further states that before he heads over to his father, he wants his son to apologize first. Of course, the fatty starts to get furious, asking what the hell he's talking about, while his son also grits his teeth in rage, but Dane makes it clear that, although it's true he hit his son and hurt him, it was all in self-defense against a threat to his life. Furthermore, he emphasizes that he didn't steal his summon, and Genpu chose to follow him. The disposable son quickly chimes in, claiming there's no way Genpu would do that, and tells his father that Dane is lying. That's when the father takes a moment to reflect. He remembers hearing that the second daughter of House Sogres is a genius summoner, so he's sure there's a good chance that girl taught Dane how to forcibly sever the bond between a familiar and its master. And his master, the chubby guy, keeps going back and forth with our boy, while Dane can't help but feel this is a nuisance. Eventually, Mogar decides to calm down because after talking so much, his jaw literally hurts. He tells Dane he won't scold him anymore, and decides they should go see what Count Sogres has to say about the situation. Speaking of the devil, the Count himself arrives on the scene accompanied by the Duke of Hermione. Of course, both the trashy son and his father are absolutely perplexed to see Count Sogres, and what's even more astonishing to them is that the Duke of Hermione is also here. As night falls, we see the red-haired boy giving his testimony to the Count about how he got lost in the garden with his little brother, which is why he asked Dane to guide them. He keeps rambling on and making up stories while Dane stands behind him indifferently, thinking about how his father is actually listening to this guy talk. I guess that doesn't surprise him, given that Halcon de Sogres cares a lot about his family and his reputation. He's not the type to lean to one side, even in conflicts with outsiders. He can tell right from wrong. After finishing his story, the red-haired boy concludes by saying that Dane suddenly headbutted him and kept using that weird technique to mock him. He says that to scare Dane, he called his summon, but Dane just stole it and tried to attack back. Once Digron finishes speaking, Mogar chimes in, telling the Count he only intended to give Dane a warning. However, he insists that stealing someone's summon is clearly wrong and he just can't let that part go. Finally, the Count of Sogres also steps in, informing Mogar that he won't change his judgment just after hearing one side of this dispute. He wants to hear what Dane has to say, then evaluate the whole situation before passing judgment. He also assures Mogar that if he's worried about any biased judgment, the Duke of Hermione will also give his opinion on the matter. The Duke quickly smirks and states that if this is so important, he can handle it. Mogar gets frustrated as his face sweats profusely. He knows he's about to get into trouble. Involving Hermione is only going to complicate things further, and he doesn't feel good about it. Count Sogres gives his son the green light to explain himself, and Dane prepares, stating that what Mogar's son said wasn't completely accurate, but some of it is actually true. He then explains that the flowers they cultivated so carefully in their garden were trampled on a whim. So, he just told Mogar's son to get out of there, which angered Mogar's son and started the fight. Of course, both the chubby guy and his son are absolutely stunned after hearing these brutal truth bombs, with the son even trying to deny it or call Dane a liar, but the Count tells Dane to continue. So our boy further explains that when Mogar's son summoned Genpu, his order was to kill him. He also clarifies that he didn't steal his summon. Rather, Genpu came to him first and saw his goodwill. The Duke is completely baffled to see how fluently this 7-year-old kid is speaking with such grace and a proper choice of words. Dane, on the other hand, confirms, once again, that he never stole anyone's summon, anyone. Mogar loses his cool, stamping his feet on the ground and calling it nonsense. He claims that it's impossible for a summon to submit to someone who isn't even a summoner, insisting that Dane must have used some shady technique to pull it off, but it's not surprising. Dane informs Mogar that he possesses an innate affinity with summons, and a summon that isn't close enough to its master could submit to someone like him, too. Mogar refuses to believe it, while our boy simply says that this is indeed true. Mogar's face looks like he's going through serious constipation, and he just says this kid is just making things up. The Duke then intervenes, suggesting they should be able to prove it with a summon. Count Gress turns to his son, asking if he can prove it, to which Dane nods. Meanwhile, Mogar shoots a death glare at his son for getting him into this mess, while the spoiled brat is sure his father is going to punish him since he has no idea what he'll do if he fails to summon Genpu. Once the spoiled brat tries to summon Genpu, it completely fails, causing his father to yell at him just as expected. On the other hand, Dane just smirks, thinking about how he's already severed the connection, so of course, there's no way the kid can summon Genpu again. Dane then decides to prove it himself by summoning Genpu, but adds that to do so, he needs a sign that Mogar's son possesses. The spoiled brat gets angry, questioning Dane's audacity in demanding his sign. He spouts a lot of nonsense, but Count Gress interrupts him, recalling that, according to his own words, even if Dane uses the sign, he shouldn't be able to summon Genpu, so there's no problem in trying. He sweats, as he has no choice but to give the sign, so he reluctantly tells his spoiled son, Digron, to hand it over. Done! The redhead almost stumbles to the verge of tears, but his father just tells him to hurry up. Once Dane has the sign in his hand, he begins his magic, and also reveals to us that, as a summoning sign, it has the summoner's unique name engraved on it, so no one else can usually use it. However, the Genpu that Digron summoned was imbued with his mana, so the summoning sign is just a vessel, and Genpu has already connected with him. As soon as he calls for Genpu, the monster appears and starts licking his cheeks. The Count and the Duke are astonished, while Mogar and Digron tremble after being exposed for lying. The Duke finds it incredible and wonders if Dane wasn't also learning swordsmanship. His father confirms it, but admits he isn't entirely sure of his son's abilities either. The chubby guy, on the other hand, realizes he's screwed, since his whole plan has backfired. The Count then turns to him, asking if he acknowledges that Dane is telling the truth. The chubby guy quickly tries to play it cool, laughing as he admits they might have mistaken Dane for stealing their summon. He also admits that his son wasn't really trying to kill Dane and asks his spoiled son if that's correct. Digron trembles, but nods along with his father, saying he was only trying to scare Dane. But our boy is furious, seeing these bastards trying to dodge responsibility so easily. Before the two seniors can issue their final verdict on the matter, a lady enters the scene, surprising everyone present, especially Dane, whose eyes are wide open at the sight of Layla. As soon as she enters the scene, she claims that what Digron is saying isn't true. Her father quickly asks what brings her here, and she replies that she heard their voices while taking a walk. Before continuing the conversation, she quickly greets the fatty and Count Sogres. The fatty stammers in surprise as he tries to return the gesture, clearly flustered by the unexpected encounter with the Duke's daughter. Count Sogres then quickly gets to the point and asks her about her claim that Digron was lying. She confidently confirms it, saying that she indeed overheard their conversation earlier during her walk. Digron starts to lose his cool, thinking she heard everything, because that is definitely not good news for him. Then, she proceeds to spill all the juicy details, and my friend can't help but smile at this unexpected turn of events, which somehow turned out in his favor. A short while later, the little fatty tells his troublesome son to hurry up and apologize to Count Sogret. The son quickly mutters, saying that he was wrong, but the Count tells him to apologize to Dane instead, not him. The fatty quickly shoves his son towards Dane, telling him to apologize quickly. The spoiled son looks uncomfortable and hesitates before muttering a weak and insincere apology. Dane, however, is far from satisfied. He can tell that the apology is insincere, just a mandatory gesture, because his lie was exposed after an impartial witness intervened. Dane doesn't really want to accept this lame apology, but thinking about his past experiences, he decides to be the bigger person. Instead of being stubborn, he decides to show some generosity. With that, Dane accepts the spoiled son's apology, and the boy lights up with happiness, enthusiastically thanking our friend for forgiving him. Meanwhile, the chubby father also lets out a sigh of relief, realizing how close he came to losing everything. On the other hand, the Duke, who might be Dane's future father-in-law, can't help but think that he already knew Dane was a special kid. After all, he could have been stubborn about the whole thing, considering the opposing party was clearly in the wrong from the start. Finally, the Count makes it clear that since Dane accepted the apology, there will be no further discussion about the incident. However, he emphasizes that he had no intention of letting it go, especially since Degron attacked Dane to kill him. The fat father starts sweating buckets upon seeing the Count so enraged by the situation. As he tries to speak, the Count tells him to shut his mouth and orders him to take his family and leave the castle immediately. The news shakes the fatty's world to its core. If he gets kicked out now, his reputation will be in tatters and he is desperate to remain in the castle. No matter what, he desperately grabs the Count's hand and starts begging for forgiveness, saying he will do anything. Sogres asks of him, but he just wants him to forgive him this one time, but the Count quickly pulls his hand away. Making it clear he doesn't need the fat guy, he tells him that soldiers will arrive soon to officially escort him out. With that, he starts to leave the scene with his son, leaving behind the fat guy who is desperately begging for forgiveness. Sogres also tells Duke Termion that it's time to go, and the Duke quickly calls for his little girl as they start to walk away. As they walk away, Dane turns his head to look at them, feeling satisfied that they're getting what they deserve. After all, they started this whole mess, so it's only fair they reap what they sow. Anyway, he learned something important today, which is that his father can be pretty scary when he's angry. Duke Termion then asks him if it's true that he defeated that spoiled son of Mogar with a mana bullet, and Dane quickly confirms it. The Duke can't help but point out how talented Dane is, not just in spear fighting, but also in summoning and magic. It's truly extraordinary, and he's sure that history has never seen such talent before. The proud father cracks a smile, saying that he's also proud to have such an exceptional son. Meanwhile, Dane is just soaking up all the praise. While Layla is freaking out, struggling to believe what she's hearing, Duke Termion then points out that while talent is one thing, Dane is also incredibly calm. Most kids tend to get agitated during fights and stubbornly insist they're right. But Dane doesn't do that. The Duke has no doubt that this boy will grow up to be a fine. The father quickly gives Dane a gentle pat on the head, saying it's too early to know for sure. They'll have to wait until he grows up to see how things turn out. He also points out that it's all thanks to Layla that the incident was resolved peacefully. Without her testimony, things could have gotten much worse. Once Duke Termion hears this, he's quite surprised that the Sogres family has such a positive opinion of Layla. He doesn't let this opportunity pass and tries to downplay her role in the incident, suggesting that if the Count acknowledges her so much, maybe they should start discussing their marriage. Of course, Sogres is surprised to hear this and can see how eager the Duke is to marry off his daughter. To dodge the bullet, he quickly changes the subject, pointing out that the sun is already setting and it's almost time for the banquet. With a quick excuse, he dashes off the scene, telling them he'll meet them in the hall. Termion also tells his daughter to take her time coming back with Dane. He quickly starts running after the Count, mentioning that he wants to have a chat with him, leaving the two kids behind to walk together. Layla turns to our boy and asks why the summoned creature ignored its summoner and obeyed him instead. She claims she's seen famous summoners duel many times in the capital, but she's never witnessed anything like it. Dane shrugs and admits he's not sure either. It just happened. Of course, Layla pouts in annoyance seeing that Dane is intentionally hiding the truth, even though she was the one who helped him out of that mess. But my boy remains unfazed and reminds her that he helped her too, mentioning the time he helped her with her swordsmanship. Layla remembers that moment and, reluctantly, admits he has a point. Finally, Dane decides that since they've helped each other once, they can do it again. He tells her she's free to ask him for whatever she wants, and the girl immediately perks up, excitedly exclaiming that she wants to learn it right now. Dane is surprised by her impatience and wonders what could be so urgent to learn. He asks her what she wants to learn, and she quickly tells him to teach her how to use a mana bullet. Dane asks her why she's so eager to learn the mana bullet, and Layla quickly replies that she wants to become stronger and faster. She hopes to form at least 2 mana cores before entering the academy. Dane wonders why she's in such a hurry, since she's still so young. He gets the answer to his confusion as soon as she reveals that she wants to grow up fast to make her mother happy. Her mother loves her very much, and Layla is sure that becoming stronger would make her feel proud. Upon hearing her mention her mother, Dane remembers hearing the adults talk about Countess Termion, who was shown to be sick in bed. With that in mind, he figures he has no choice but to help her. She breaks out into a little happy dance and declares that she's ready to start training tomorrow, although she wouldn't mind starting her training tonight too, especially since she's not sure how long she's going to be staying here. Dane just shakes his head and tells her she can start whenever she wants. He assures her that once she understands the flow of magic, learning the mana bullet won't be that difficult. Layla then enthusiastically asks what he'll want in return for teaching her. Dane remains silent, which makes it pretty clear that the request he has in mind won't be as simple as just showing someone how to use magic bullets. The scene then cuts back to the banquet hall, where the guests are whispering and murmuring among themselves about that fat nobleman, Tyron. They've heard that Count Tyron was kicked out of the castle, and everyone is wondering what he did to deserve that. Some guests mention that Tyron's eldest son caused some kind of incident by picking a fight with young Master Dane and ended up being taught a lesson. They laugh among themselves, amused at the thought of the fat cat coming here only to be humiliated and embarrassed. Word has also spread that young Master Dane is an outstanding summoner. A guest wonders if this means House Sogres will now be a prestigious house of summoners. However, another chimes in, saying that's not all. Young Master Dane can also use magic, which is something they're having a hard time believing. We then see this large, mustached man introducing himself to Dane as Baron Opent. He asks our boy if he knows anything about the Opent territory in the east. Dane humbly lowers his head as a sign of respect, and replies that he's heard the territory is famous for its grilled trout and sapphires. The man laughs heartily while admitting that Dane is absolutely correct. He continues, saying that the trout and sapphires of House Opent are the best on the continent. He then pushes his daughter forward, saying he almost forgot to introduce her. The girl steps forward and introduces herself as Sylvia Opent, and politely greets him. Dane is surprised to see her and nervously returns the gesture, stating his own name. I have no idea why he's so nervous around her, but it seems we'll find out soon. Sylvia lunges towards him with a mischievous look, and whispers that she's heard he's the one who will inherit the Sogres house in the future. Dan responds uncertainly, and Sylvia enthusiastically tells him to stop playing dumb. She claims she's heard he's talented in many ways, and bluntly tells him that he'll be under her care from now on, especially since there's a chance they could become family in the future, and there it is. Now, it makes total sense why Dane is nervous around her. This girl is just too direct and didn't even hesitate for a second. Just at that moment, Layla joins the scene, grabbing Dane's hand. It's not surprising that Sylvia is startled to see a potential rival, as Layla practically throws daggers at our boy with her sharp eyes and demands to know who this lady is. Sylvia recognizes Layla immediately and greets her warmly, introducing herself as the eldest daughter of the Baron. Layla tries to return the gesture, but the anger on her face makes it clear she is far from happy, even though she says, "It's a pleasure to meet you, Sylvia." The two ladies exchange smiles that practically ooze murderous intent. Seeing them reminds Dane of a memory, and he can tell that both girls are absolutely ready to fight. Finally, Layla takes his hand and says she's borrowing him for now since they already had a date. Sylvia glares at her as she asks if he remembers their plans. Of course, the poor Dane has no idea what she's talking about, but agrees anyway, apologizing to Sylvia and promising they'll talk again later. Sylvia forces a smile and tells him they will definitely talk later. As Layla drags Dane away, Sylvia can't help but feel annoyed at how this girl just snatched her man away from her. Layla, on the other hand, still hasn't calmed down. She's absolutely furious at that girl's audacity trying to take Dane from her. Dane finds himself surprised under Layla's piercing gaze. He can't help but lament that the beloved daughter of the Duke, who holds the second greatest power in the capital after the Emperor, is no match for the young lady of the Eastern Baron. So it's not surprising that Sylvia simply gave up like that. Once Dane and Layla are outside, she starts interrogating him about his connection with Sylvia. She wonders if there's a possibility he might get engaged to her. But our boy quickly dismisses any such relationship, insisting they were just greeting each other. Layla brightens up at the thought, and even Dane can see her mood change instantly. After walking for a bit, they finally arrive at the secret place that only Dane knows. He's sure they won't be disturbed by anyone here. As soon as they enter this hidden spot, Layla lights up and starts dancing with happiness, excited to see such a beautiful place. Layla is also relieved that no one will know if they do something here. Dane nods, saying she's absolutely right. This is a great place to train, but before they start practicing, he asks if she has ever felt mana. Layla admits she has felt a little, although it's not enough to form a mana core. She mentions that she has tried to absorb mana by breathing. Her explanation reminds Dane that she's not yet at the emission stage. He learned to feel mana naturally on the battlefield, so he's surprised a well-bred household taught her this. He decides to start with something simpler and tells her the first step is to feel the mana she's absorbing. Layla seems a bit confused by this, so Dane explains that if she wants to expel mana from her body, first she needs to learn how to control the mana inside her. The most important part is imagination. He tells her to close her eyes and imagine the mana swirling inside her. However, after a few moments, she tries, but literally nothing happens. Dane can see from the expression on her face that she didn't quite get the instructions. Layla tries again, but once more nothing happens. Frustrated, she complains to Dane about why it's not working. Dane reassures her, telling her that this is normal for her first try, and tells her to focus again. Meanwhile, Count Sogres is taking a peek at the two kids. He can't help but feel proud that his son is already teaching someone, even though he's still so young. It really makes him believe that Dane has grown up. Just then, Duke Termion sneaks up on Sogres and asks him what the heck he's doing there. Sogres' heart almost stops at the sudden question, but the Duke quickly tells him there's no need to be alarmed and asks if he's watching two lovebirds enjoying a moment alone. Count Sogres raises an eyebrow and asks what he means by lovebirds and, besides, how he even got here. The Duke laughs at the thought that the Count was actually trying to hide here. He then reminds Sogres how he did a pretty sloppy job of sneaking around, especially since his wife is the Empire's legendary assassin. Poor Sogres has no idea what to say after being caught red-handed, snooping around, while the Duke playfully scolds him, reminding him that if the lord of the castle goes around prying into other people's business, people will speak ill of him. Naturally, the doting father gets annoyed and defensively says he was just following his son. The Duke laughs at this and can't help but point out that he too was just following his daughter. It turns out both fathers are a lost cause. They stand there, side by side, acting like a couple of teenagers trying to watch their kids' interactions, as if they were spying on girls outside a school gate. Meanwhile, with the kids, Dane opens his dimensional bag and the girl is quite fascinated to see he already has something like this. When Dane mentions that his older sister made it for him and gave it as a gift, Layla starts to feel jealous. Unlike him, her older brother stopped paying attention to her once they entered the academy. He then takes out a mirror from the dimensional bag and the girl casually asks what they're going to do with it. He explains that he brought it just in case it might help. It's easier to imagine something in your mind while looking at a mirror. Rather than relying on imagination alone, he tells the curious girl to stand in front of the mirror so she can see herself completely. The girl quickly gets in front of the mirror and they start doing the magic limbo again. This time, Dane can tell she's taking it very seriously. She takes a deep breath, while both loving fathers crouch on the ground as if they were sitting Indian style. The Duke can't help but point out that it seems like Layla is taking a liking to Dane. Sogres asks if that's really the case, and the Duke explains that it is, because it's unusual, that Lilia gets along with someone so easily. Sogres asks if that's really true, since she seems like a bright girl. Duke Termion remains silent for a moment before speaking, saying that she's only bright on the outside, and that he can't say the same for what's inside. He explains that after her brothers left for the academy, her mother became bedridden, so they haven't been able to be together like before. This situation has made it difficult for her to open up to others, and that's what has been happening. The Count points out that if he already knows everything, then why does he always act so coldly towards his daughter? This Termion is genuinely moved that the Count has noticed something like that and admits that he's doing it on purpose. He explains that when he raised his sons, He showered them with attention, and they became spoiled. But Sogres reminds him that he shouldn't assume Lilia will be the same. She'll be hurt if she finds out, and now it makes sense why she asked Dane for help instead of her father. Termion then points out to his friend, joking about how he's still nagging like in the old days. But the Count quickly asks when he ever did that, especially since what he said is the truth. The Duke changes the subject, asking when he plans to send his son to the capital. He suggests that if he sends him, the ducal house will open its doors wide and let him stay in the ducal castle. Ducal. Sogres remains silent and looks at his son, and after seeing him happy, he simply says that he'll do whatever Dane wishes. He has the freedom to choose his path, just like his older sisters. We also notice Miss Sogres observing both loving fathers, clearly embarrassed by how shameless they are as they look around, but finally she just smiles, realizing that the love they have for their children holds a strange power over them. She decides not to ruin the mood and pretends she hasn't seen anything. Back with the kids, Lily thanks Dane for his help and calls him a true genius. She admits that while everyone around her calls her a genius, she feels like nothing special compared to him, while Dane casually looks around to see if both their fathers have quietly left. He assures her that this is just the beginning and that she will definitely get stronger too. Then, she asks him if he's going to the academy, since it's the only place where all the geniuses of the... To that, he says he's still not sure and isn't convinced he needs to go there, since he can get plenty strong just by training on his own. The girl starts to scold him for his narrow-minded thinking and reminds him that attending the academy to study isn't everything. It's the gateway to forming your noble faction, and it's the best way to build connections from a young age. Dane is surprised that she's quite smart for being 7 years old and understanding how the real world works. Finally, he responds to her argument by saying that he already knows about that, but he's simply not interested in going to the academy. There's still a mountain of books he hasn't read in the library, and he still has a lot to learn from his parents. Lilia acknowledges that this is true, but asks if he doesn't want to hang out with other kids his age, especially since she heard his older sisters are also attending the academy. It seems like Dane is running out of arguments against her persistence, so he tries to brush her off by saying he's thinking about going in the future. If he feels like it, then she tells him to visit her house once he plans on going to the capital. And that's how they promise to meet again. Speaking of meeting again, she remembers asking him when he's going to make his request. Now that she has taught him how to use mana bullets, he just shakes his head and says he'll tell her when he goes to the capital. This surprises her and she lets out a cry of disbelief. She's probably surprised that he's going to the capital. After all, the day of her departure finally arrives as Lilia's carriage starts rolling down the road. Dane looks at a stone-like object in his hand that was given to him by his future father-in-law. The scene flashes back to the moment the Duke handed him this mysterious object. When Dane asks what it is, the father-in-law replies that it's his birthday gift and hopes he likes it. Furthermore, he reveals that his house's symbols are vengeance, the sword, and the blacksmith, and the story of the house ends. It began with their progenitor, who was a blacksmith. Thanks to him, their house has the best forge in the Empire. In fact, the best forge on the entire continent. All the weapons made in Thermia that protect the Empire were forged there. Of course, our boy already knows all this, because according to his previous knowledge, all the minerals in the world can be found in that forge, and all sorts of mystical weapons and artifacts are created in the greatest forge on the continent. The father-in-law then reveals that if Dane presents the insignia at the forge, they will create a weapon of his choice for him. It's then that we finally learn that this rock-like object is essentially an insignia, a certified token that proves the honor and skills of its holder. Count Sogres is absolutely astonished when he sees the Duke giving away such a precious insignia, something that even the imperial family desires. The Duke simply pats his son-in-law on the head and tells him to grow up well and help his father. His wife-to-be says goodbye to him one last time, and so they part ways. In the present moment, his mother crouches down next to him, and after seeing his downcast face, she asks him if he's upset because they left. He admits that he is, saying that she was practically his first friend. His mother assures him that once he goes to the capital, he'll be able to see her again, and he'll become even more handsome, which will surely impress her. Well, I guess his mother is right, since he can't stay here forever, and he'll have plenty of opportunities to see her again in the future. so I wish him the best until they meet again. Meanwhile, as the Duke travels in his carriage, his mind is still occupied with thoughts of Dane. He finds it strange that every time he looks at him, he's reminded of that warrior, Argrik, who showed the skill of a triple-class warrior at a young age. He's sure that if Argrik were still alive, he could have become one of the Exa-class knights of the Drenic Empire. He hopes to see Dane again when he has grown stronger. A few days later, we see our boy sitting alone in front of this egg. He's been giving it mana every morning and night, and now he wonders if it's too soon for it to hatch. This egg contains a mysterious familiar, and even if someone isn't a summoner, they can infuse the egg with their mana and imprint as the master before it hatches, allowing them to control a summon that normally only stays temporarily. He knows that the quality of his mana needs to match that of his familiar, and probably there are many complicated conditions that haven't been met. However, he has heard that some eggs never hatch because their conditions are never met, so he hopes that's not the case here. Although he changes the flow and strength of his mana, there's still no reaction. After putting in a lot of effort, he once again puts the egg back, thinking that he's just being greedy by expecting to succeed all at once. Suddenly, the butler comes to the door asking Dane if he's ready. At that very moment, the egg begins to react and starts making noises. Dane quickly rushes to the egg, sure that he just heard something. The butler also bursts into the room, asking about the noise. Dane tells him to wait a moment while he checks the egg first. However, he once again finds himself disappointed, realizing he was just excited over nothing because he can't feel anything different. The butler asks if the egg showed a reaction, to which Dane replies that it didn't, saying he probably just imagined it. Once he finally enters the training hall, he first practices his swordsmanship. After noticing his perfect movements, the butler is quite happy and excited. He claps while asking since when he learned swordsmanship. Dane simply brushes him off, saying he just wanted to play with the sword for a bit. The butler showers him with praise, calling him a genius who even has a talent for the sword. Looking at the sword, Dane reflects on how learning to use a new weapon like the spear was fun, but he also wanted to draw a sword. Unfortunately, he hadn't been able to hold a sword all that time, as his father always watched him very closely. Fortunately, he's happy that he hasn't lost his touch with it. The butler hurries to get some snacks and returns with a tray full of delicacies, telling Dane to eat something before getting back to his training. Meanwhile, we cut to Count Sogres, who is looking out the window lost in thought. He's felt a bit exhausted organizing this banquet every year, but at least it gets done. He has learned through this banquet that many nobles are paying attention to the South. Most of them are eager to forge a good relationship with him, which is a good change. Since the war ended, the South has been enjoying its great climate and all the luxuries that nobles simply can't resist, so perhaps their interest should have been obvious from the start. Still, even with all these developments, it doesn't compare to the attention Dane is getting. You see, the conflicts with Count Tyron's eldest son were beyond Sogres' expectations, but Dane handled the situation with maturity, calmly and logically, laying everything out before the adults, which was very impressive. And he even showcased his talent with confidence. He can't help but think that his son is a bit too mature for his age. Sometimes he wishes Dane would act a little more like other children and relax a bit. As the clock nears the training time, he knows it's time to head to training. He pulls out the legendary Dragontail spear and decides to have Dane handle it a bit today, but as soon as he steps onto the grounds with the spear in hand, he freezes when he sees Dane brandishing his sword. His sword instead, now he's curious as to why a sword. His mind recalls and he's convinced that damn Duke must have told him something. Otherwise, there's no way Dane would be using a sword after all that spear training. He just stands there, watching his son perform all those impressive stunts with the sword. Seriously, Dane seems to know what he's doing. The strength, the thing he's showing off, is something that even experienced sword fighters would have a hard time matching. And it makes his father wonder when he learned all this. But one thing is for sure, Dane definitely has a talent for the sword too. He finally calls out to his son, asking when he learned all those impressive moves. Well, it seems like Dane's kept secret is finally out. So he decides it's probably best to tell his dad the truth. He admits that he didn't actually learn any of it. Hearing this, his father is even more perplexed, leaving him to wonder if this is another hidden talent. He starts to think out loud about how Dane already knows spearmanship, magic, assassination, summoning, and now swordsmanship too, and adds that if it were anyone else, he wouldn't believe a child could show talent in all these fields. He then asks Dane if he's curious about the world beyond their walls. Dane seems a bit confused, not really knowing what his father is getting at. The father then tells him that if he wants to explore what's out there, he should do it. He truly believes that this country might be too small for his son's vast talent, and if he stays cooped up here, he'll be the one to miss out. Dane feels a wave of sadness, realizing that his father has accepted the fact that he can't hold on to him forever. He finally says he would be delighted to learn about the outside world. His dad smiles hearing this and gets straight to the point, telling him it's finally time to prepare his son to go out into the real world. The father admits it's a bit bittersweet to see his son go, but he knows he has to respect Dane's wishes. He then presents the spear to him, saying he brought something extra special today. It doesn't take long for Dane to realize what it is, and his dad clears up any doubt, reminding him that this is Dragontail, the spear that reacted to him on his first birthday. He holds out his hand, encouraging Dane to take it. The moment Dane takes the spear, it begins to react, and he can feel an incredible surge of power flowing through the weapon. His dad laughs, saying that it's reacting much more strongly than when he was only 1 year old. And honestly, who could blame it for that? He then proudly tells his son that he plans to make him master the spear before he leaves. So he'd better be ready. He promises Dane that one day Dragontail will be his. But first, he needs to grow enough to wield it with pride. Dane enthusiastically promises to work hard and honor his father's teachings. Later, back in his room, Dane's mind is filled with thoughts of the outside world. He had always been curious about it. Even during those long days on the battlefield as a soldier, all he really knew was war. Setting up camp, cleaning his weapons, eating bland food, and preparing for the next battle. The only way out was for the war to end or for him to die in battle, and honestly, he felt those were his only options. But now, with the opportunity to lead a normal life ahead of him, he can barely imagine what life would be like outside the battlefield. However, since Dane knows he has to take this chance, he has no idea how his talents will be used, how the world will accept him, or what he can achieve out there. But for the first time, he has the opportunity to travel, explore, and achieve everything he sets his mind to. At first, he just wanted to stay and enjoy the warmth of this place. But thanks to his father's question, his thoughts have changed, and he has finally decided to go out, and he feels quite excited about it. Just as he's thinking about this, his mother enters his room, which leaves him surprised for a moment. He asks her when she entered the room, and this crazy assassin reminds him that he was so lost in thought he didn't even hear her knock. I can tell she's lying through her teeth, given that she's an assassin, and she snuck into his room quietly. Then, she asks if he's really curious about the world outside the country, and he answers positively, saying that his dad mentioned it would be a waste of his talent to stay here. After thinking for a moment, he admits that he's also curious about the outside world. He then starts to apologize to his mother, but she hugs him, saying there's nothing to apologize for. He reminds her that his sisters aren't here and he's worried about leaving for the outside world, but the lady reassures him by telling him she doesn't mind because she knows how incredible his talents are. She adds that even if he didn't want to go, the outside world would eventually call for him. He admits that it would be wonderful if he could stay longer with his mother, but the world won't allow it, which is why she encourages him to go and pursue what he wants to do. He promises that even if he leaves home, he'll come back often to tell her about everything he sees in the world. His mother thanks him and says it seems she finally needs to teach him before sending him out into the world, just as his father is about to teach him. As he wonders aloud what kind of teaching she's talking about, his excited mother babbles on about teaching him everything related to assassination. She goes on and on about all the skills and knowledge she has, and Dane can't help but think that this is going to lead to some really exhausting days before he even sets foot outside. In short, she tells him she's going to teach him a bunch of things, and he assures her he'll do his best to learn. As he looks at her, he can't help but think about how he's going to receive special lessons from his mother filled with love. Many years have passed, and the scene then shifts to the southern region of the Alshan Empire, the county of Sogres. a place known for its warm climate and abundant natural resources. This place has become a cornerstone of the empire, helping them stay strong during the war thanks to the magnanimous rule of Count Sogres. It's a region filled with peace and warmth. Finally, with the end of the war, the few remaining rebel forces have been captured, bringing an era of lasting peace for everyone. On a bright day, people are chatting about how the young master Dane visited one of the shops recently. They can't stop talking about how the shopkeeper's eldest daughter literally fainted when she saw him. The ladies gossip among themselves, saying that he's getting more handsome every day, and wish they could see his face at least once. There's even a rumor floating around that he's still single, which gives them a glimmer of hope. But a friend quickly reminds them that he's only 14 years old and tells her friend for drooling over an underage boy. One of the ladies then mentions that there are rumors that Dane doesn't look like a 14-year-old at all. He's already as tall as the Count of Sogres. Some even say he could easily be mistaken for a 20-year-old. Well, enough gossip. Let's see for ourselves how our boy has grown. So we move to the outskirts of Sogres County, an area steeped in ancient magic known as the Forest of the Last Days. Here Dane is on a special mission assigned by his mother, Lily Sowers. We see him holding a spear in one hand and in the other some kind of cloth, probably a map or something else. I'm not too sure. Whatever it is, he has already decided his course with only 3 hours before sunset. He knows he needs to get out of the forest before the sun sets. He begins to ascend, jumping through the forest with the agility of a ninja. The most important thing on this mission is not to get caught by his enemies. During this time, Dane needs to dodge the traps and nests set by his mother and escape the forest, which is full of all sorts of other dangers. After jumping for a while, he finally lands back on the ground, takes a deep breath, absorbing the air and energy from his surroundings. He holds it for a moment before letting it out again, and once he prioritizes stealth and blends in with the environment, he begins to notice hidden traps revealing themselves. Right now, he sees these thin, almost transparent threads crisscrossing the area. He knows that all the traps will be activated as soon as he touches them. So, remember, it's a basic mechanism, but that's also what makes it more dangerous. But fortunately for him, this one seems easy to disarm. Rat-like monsters quickly appear in the clearing, and as soon as they see Dane standing there, they don't waste a moment before lunging to attack him. It turns out to be a whole pack, and he definitely didn't expect them to show up here. What's even more worrying is that the whole pack is charging at him quite terrifyingly. The speed. Before they hit the tripwires and activate the traps, he needs to deal with them quickly. But then he hesitates, because accidentally touching the trap could be even more dangerous. That still, there's no time to waste, and he needs to get out of here. He starts running, and as soon as the rats trigger the needle traps, sharp claws spring out from all directions, trapping the unfortunate rats that fell into the trap setup. It seems luring the rats into the trap was part of his plan all along, and he's relieved that they fell for it, saving him the trouble of facing them directly. But then he sees one particular rat that isn't dead yet. After closing the distance, the monster leaps straight at him. Dane continues to face off against the rest of the Russells. The beast was surprisingly fast, nearly catching him. The giant rat braked and turned for another attack. This time it used its long-range weapon, spitting a strange substance from its mouth. He carefully assessed the situation. As the substance headed towards him, he didn't know what it was, but the substance certainly felt dangerous. He spun his spear and effectively dispelled the attack. The young man gritted his teeth, knowing he couldn't afford to waste any more time fighting this burly rat. Defending himself would only cost him precious time. So it was time to turn the tables and attack. A blue aura began to form around his body. As he locked onto his target with a quick and fierce chain of movements, Dane showed off his impressive spear skills. He moved freely in the air while flawlessly tracking the enemy's position. The result was that Russell's head was split in two, a clean cut. Dane didn't even bother to look at the result of his attack. He just ran out of there and continued with his mission. By dusk, he had reached the final point of the trial. He was completely exhausted, panting and gasping for air, while doing his best not to vomit. At least he had finally escaped the forest and all its horrors. Suddenly, He felt a fierce presence coming from the forest and worried that his fight was not over yet. He quickly got up and regretted letting his guard down to rest, just as he was about to confront the presence. He stopped in his tracks. It was just his mother, Mother Lily. She had intentionally let her presence be known to test how Dane would react, and he passed. In addition, his total time running through the forest was 3 hours and 30 minutes, even faster than Lily's record. She, Lilo, had been watching the whole time. A mother can't just leave her son alone in such a dangerous place, after all. Lilo knew better than anyone how talented her son really was, but as a mother, it's a bit different. And through this test that Dane practically passed with flying colors, Lily couldn't find a single flaw in his survival and adaptability skills. She affectionately grabbed Dane's cheeks and stated that he could be recruited as an assassin at the rate of his improvement. To commemorate his successful run, Lily took out her most prized possession as the Empire's best assassin, a dagger. She thought the weapon would suit her son better now. From now on, Dane would be the owner of the Nighthorn. Lily gladly passed the legendary weapon to her son, since she wouldn't be using it anyway. Nighthorn was created from the mysterious mineral Etherium, a mineral that could take on the elements of any object if he wished. He could use it to store all the poisons in the world. By doing this, he could mix and absorb poison for his own use. Dane sincerely thanked his mother for such a precious heirloom and swore to treat Nightfall well. This also marked the end of his assassin training with his mom. Just as they were preparing to leave and return home, the mother and son heard a guttural scream nearby. It seemed to have come from the depths of the forest, so they decided to investigate. We fast forward a few days later. Inside the walls of the Annex Tower of Sogres County, in one of the guest rooms, a man woke up coughing and screaming in horror. He had long, snow-white hair and a beard, and he seemed completely confused. The mysterious man struggled to catch his breath after waking from his dream. He finally looked around the luxurious room and wondered where he was. The last thing he remembered was eating a mushroom in that damn place. The door creaked open and Dane came out carrying some water. He warned the man not to move much, as he was still in the process of detoxing. Dane explained that the old man must have accidentally eaten a poisonous, red-nosed mushroom. Fortunately, Dane and Lily had found and saved him just in time. The old man remembered seeing those red-nosed mushrooms. He didn't think they would be so deadly. If Dane and Lily had arrived a little later, the old man would already be a decaying corpse. Dane handed the man a glass of water, seeing how thirsty he must be. The young man carefully observed the strange old man. He saw a belt that had the insignia of the Nixian Tower of Magic in the old man's possession. He was definitely not an ordinary manzona. If it weren't for Nighthorn absorbing the poison running through his body, the old man would have died. Now that the old man had calmed down a bit, he asked Dane where they were. And the young man honestly said they were in the Annex Tower of Sogres County. The old man must have gotten lost in the southern region, was poisoned by those damn mushrooms, and walked all the way south. Dane advised him to take it easy for now and wait for the Count to come see him soon. The young man also introduced himself as the youngest son of Count Sogres, Dane Sogres. The old man's face lit up with interest upon hearing about Arabella Sogres, the genius who was being watched by all the magic towers in the Empire. Dane also explained that they found the old man in the forest in the middle of his training with his mom. The old man almost spat out the water he was drinking after hearing that. That crazy forest made his life impossible, even being an 8-chain mage. He got lost, and the flow of his mana reversed while casting a spell, shattering his entire body. The whole forest contained ancient mana everywhere, Luger, and then there were those undetectable traps scattered throughout the area. The forest belonged to House Ogres, so naturally it would be a dangerous place for anyone who wasn't a family member. Besides, due to the presence of ancient magic, the flow of mana was different from that of modern mages. It was really the worst place for a modern mage to be. The old man finally realized that he really would have died if it weren't for Dane. He also realized that the boy in front of him could be a generational talent. If he was already strong enough to train freely in that hellish place, Dane even made the antidote he urgently needed to escape death. From his appearance, this young man seemed to be somewhere in his teens. Despite his young age, he was able to formulate an antidote that required extensive knowledge and precise skills. The old man couldn't believe how blessed the family was, having two generational geniuses in the fields of magic and summoning. Even the youngest son seemed extraordinarily monstrous. If the continent were still at war, House Sogres could easily become the most powerful noble house within the Alshan Empire. The old man thanked Dane, and admitted that he owed the young man his life. He was a little surprised by the boy's bold response, but stated that he pays the debts he incurred. First, he wanted to introduce himself properly. Turns out this old man was Sidrain Gauss. Not long ago, he was the head of the Nixian Magic Tower. Sidrain took pride in his name and stature, inviting Dane to ask for whatever he wanted. The young man simply smiled at Sidrain's smug humility. He knew this old mage must be one of those people who gets by without a home, storing everything he owns in a space. Sidrain was bewildered by Dane's calmness after he introduced himself. Normally, people would be shocked or humbled in the presence of the head of a mage tower, but the boy was unfazed. Trying to reestablish his status, he urged Dane to ask for whatever he wanted without holding back. The young man paused for a second, seemingly thinking about his next words. Sidrain smiled in anticipation of being able to prove his reliability, but he simply asked for more time to think about his reward, not giving Sidrain the satisfaction of feeling powerful with his nonchalant response. In the end, the young man headed for the door and wished the powerful mage a speedy recovery, telling him to rest a bit more. When the young man finally left the room, Sidrain simply sat on the bed, astonished by the carefree boy. He was the first person to treat Sidrain as if he were just an ordinary mage. Old Sidrain was thinking of leaving after staying for 1 or 2 days, but that wouldn't be the case. Now, he had just found an interesting boy in the south and wanted to know more about Dane. Dane casually explained to German who Sidrain was, and the attendant explained, excitedly, that 8 chain mages are at the top of the food chain, the elite of the elite. That meant an influential figure was now in debt to Dane. You see, the magic towers function like independent territories on this continent, more like sovereign nations. That meant Sidrain was an immensely influential person. However, it's a mystery why the head of a magic tower was wandering around the forest in the first place. But that was no ordinary forest. Mages consider it a forbidden area, calling it the Forest of the Last Days. Just from the name, it's clear that it's not the kind of place ordinary people should be messing with. Dane looked at the sword in his hand and asked German to get him a new one. The ones he had been using had become too light and short for his body. Fortunately, they had a whole variety of weapons from the spoils of war that the Count brought back. Tomorrow, Dane could start training with a proper longsword. For now, he would just use the light sword to finish his training. On second thought, he also had the shield given to him by Duke Termion, plus a free coupon to forge any weapon he wanted. 7 years had passed since that day. Looking back, Dane remembers those days fondly. If he ever traveled to the capital, his first stop would definitely be the Duke's territory. After practice, Dane ran into his father outside the training hall. Dane thought his father had business to attend to outside the castle, but surprisingly, he was back. Previously, things wrapped up outside earlier than expected, and the Count had to hurry home to meet the head of the magic tower, who was recovering in one of their guest rooms. He hoped that Cinderella could help Arabella. After all, she was going to need a good teacher. Dane also considered asking the head of the magic tower to help his sister, but he wasn't sure if the old man could handle that girl's temper. He had heard that Arabella hit one of her elders for being annoying. In any case, the Count of Sogres praised his son for doing the right thing and saving someone else's life. Sure, he just did what he had to do, but he still went out of his way to do something not just anyone can. Dr. Dane had really grown into an incredible young man over the years. It's getting harder and harder for Count Sogres to even catch a glimpse of his daughters' faces. Arabella had finished her extended semester and was now choosing a magic tower to join, while Claire had been appointed as a professor. It's the cost of having extraordinary children. Sure, Claire and Arabella were exceptional in their own ways, but the Count also had high expectations for his only son. He often wonders how the world would handle a man with so many talents. The Count had been eagerly awaiting the day his rival Balthermion would see how Dane had progressed. Years had passed since he was reincarnated as the son of House Sogres, But the thought of crossing swords with Duke Termion still fills him with determination. In 1,000. Anyway, he also wonders how Layla is doing in the capital. Her last letter arrived maybe a year ago. Dane looks forward to seeing what she's up to when he passes through the capital. A few days later, Sidrain complained about going crazy from being in the guest room. He still hadn't fully recovered. The doctor advised him not to venture too far and forbade him from using magic. His magical reflux had not yet been purified, and the poison that seeped into his body had not yet been completely nullified. He would have to rest and recover a bit more. Sidrin didn't have many options. He hadn't been able to use magic for a long time, so this situation would be a change of pace, but he couldn't stand being cooped up in the room all day. So he left the room even though he didn't know the annex. The doctor fears the old man might cause trouble and that he'll be the one to suffer. In the few days that Sidrain had been in the guest room, the housekeepers started spreading rumors about the old bat. They say that mages are either geniuses or lunatics. Some of the maids had seen Sidrin go up and down every floor of the annex dozens of times, and now he was just staring at the flowers in the garden for hours. The maids heard that the old man was supposed to be an incredibly powerful mage, but all they had seen was a crazy old man. They worry about their lady Arabella. Sidrain had been completely smitten with the estate's beautifully designed garden. He never would have guessed they were arranged to possess such extraordinary magic. Ben approached the old man. He had looked everywhere, only to find Sidrain in the garden. Sidrain wasn't too thrilled about being confined to a foreign place until his full recovery, but everyone just wanted what was best for him in mind. Anyway, the area was certainly a good place to rest and recover. He could see why so many nobles come to the south once the holiday season begins. Dane loved the south, so it's a shame he has to leave soon. Curious. Sidrain asked the young man where he was headed. Dane casually replied that he would be going to the capital soon. Sidrain assumed the boy must be going to the academy. After all, both of his sisters were prominent figures at that prestigious place. While the daughters of House Sogres were famous for having sublime levels of talent, Sidrain was more curious about Dane. So he imbued mana into his eyes and decided to take a look for himself. Inside the young man's body, there was a roaring wave of pure erupting power. Sidrain's eyes widened, as he had never seen mana so dense. The density of the boy's power was unheard of. If the geniuses of his age group could be considered a stream, then Dane was a rapid torrent, washing away everything that stood in his way. Normally, the enormous amount of magic in such a young body would be so unstable that it would be constantly on the verge of exploding, but this was not the case here. Finally, he confronted the old man for assessing his magic without permission. He called the old man out. Sidrain awkwardly stopped his probing and praised the young man for noticing. He apologized and admitted that he might have been reckless. Inwardly, Sidrain was still trying to understand how Dane could contain such wild power within him. In his years as an archmage, the young man was a unique case. Confused by the old man's reaction to what he saw, Dane wondered what was going on. Sidrain was so focused on the sheer density of Dane's mana that only now did he realize the boy didn't have a magic circle. With his raging mana, a magic circle should be easy to form. The old man's face twisted in horror as he realized the atrocity that must have occurred to the young man. Sidrain looked into Dane's core and saw 2 mana cores. Of course, it was an incredible feat to develop 2 mana cores at his young age, but the old mage seemed furious that he chose that path. He believed that possessing such mana density and using it only to wield a spear was madness. 2. Sidrain thought that Dane using his mana to form cores instead of circles was blasphemy. The young man had practically turned his back on the greatest talent the Archmage had ever seen. 3, confused by the old man's rant, he asked if he could use both mana cores and magic circles. That only infuriated the old man even more. He held his head in frustration over the wasted potential. He doesn't even know where to begin explaining the gravity of the hole Dane had dug for himself. Sidrain asked the young man if he knew the reason why the lifespan of magic swordsmen was so short. It's because they possess both mana cores and circles simultaneously. However, those 2 concepts constantly interfere with each other. When they clash, problems arise. It had become a sort of unwritten law. the mana compressed in the core would be transmitted to the circle, so a circle that can't handle the overflowing power would burst into pieces. Dane had a basic understanding of the concept himself, but he didn't know it could be this bad. Sidrain had grumbled at seeing how the world's greatest talent was being wasted on training with a spear. Dane, worried, asked if it would truly be impossible for him to practice magic without a circle. Sidrain explained that while it's not impossible, refining mana without a circle to cast spells that require purified magic would be theoretically impossible, improbable. Furthermore, many have tried to follow that theoretical path, but all the attempts that Sidrain had personally seen ended in failure. However, this didn't discourage Dane from trying this path, even though he hadn't properly tried it before. He simply felt that he could cast spells without the refinement of a magic circle. And just like that, by rearranging the magic code, he managed to produce a fire spell with a rather powerful explosion. All the doubts in his mind were dispelled as he did it, even though it was just a basic one-chain spell, but he managed to cast a spell without a magic core. Sidrain's mouth fell open in shock. Common sense dictated that anyone without a magic circle shouldn't be able to cast spells. In his years overseeing the magic tower of Nixon, he had never seen anything like it. Dane continued to modify the magic code and created a mana barrier around his body. He explained that Arabella had discovered his high affinity for magic and wondered if that was the reason he could do improbable things with mana. That might be the case, but what he was doing was far outside the theoretical realm. For Sidringhouse, who had been at the pinnacle of mages for a long time, this was the first time he felt what commoners feel before the elites and their otherworldly capabilities. He was witnessing an innate talent that was truly world-shaking. Meanwhile, Dane was simply amused to have gotten the spells to work. The old archmage's knees trembled with excitement. Dane had an unparalleled affinity with mana and an energy purer and denser than anyone else in the world. The boy was a true prodigy, a one-of-a-kind prodigy. Sidrain couldn't take it anymore. He immediately asked Dane if he wanted to become his personal disciple. The old man worked very hard to convince Dane to learn his teachings, believing that ignoring such a talent would be a disservice to the world. Dane was getting tired of the old man's persistence when Sidrain asked him if he knew how to use a two-chain magic spell. The young man hadn't been exposed to two-chain magic codes, so he couldn't cast a higher-level spell. Sidringhouse laughed and boasted that if Dane were under his tutelage, he could cast 8-chain magic spells in no time. Still, Dane politely declined the invitation. Sidrain's patience was running out. Suddenly, Count Sogres intervened and laughed at the closeness of the Archmage and his son. When asked what the two were talking about, Dane answered honestly that the old man kept trying to take him as a disciple, even after he had refused several times. At least Sidrain knew how to behave properly in front of the man of the house, as he praised Dane for his potential to become a great mage in the future. He emphasized that Dane has a brighter future than anyone could imagine, given that he could already use chain-level magic without a circle as a warrior, a fact that amazed Count Sogres. He had a rough idea of how incredible that feat was. At this point, the Count had stopped being surprised by his son's inhuman achievements. The young man had no basic knowledge of spells, yet he could cast them naturally. The Count also praised the former head of the Magic Tower for immediately seeing Dane's talent. But although the word talent wouldn't be enough, Dane is a genius who could truly become an unparalleled magic swordsman. Hearing that phrase, Count Arkin imagined his son giving up the spear and taking up the sword. His cheerful mood changed, and anger could be felt in the air. The title of magic swordsman simply doesn't sit well with Arkan. Dane flinched at the fact that Sidrain mentioned a word that should never be spoken in front of his father, failing to grasp the situation. Sidrain kept insisting on the possibility of Dane becoming a magic swordsman, even promising to take full responsibility and turn the young man into the most powerful fighter in the Empire by the time he realized. When he noticed the Count's change in mood, it was already too late. Too late. Count Arkan shouted at the top of his lungs that his son could not become a magic swordsman. Sidrain argued that sword and magic would be the perfect combination for a genius suited for both. Arkan continued to rant that his son would not become a magic swordsman. If anything, he would become a magic caster instead. Sidran finally knew what the problem was. Dane just tried to stay as quiet as possible while his father calmed down. Poor Sidran had never met a family as abnormal as, a family of ogres. You see, for a mage, becoming a disciple holds great meaning. Mages, especially powerful ones, usually train their successors through an act called inheritance. It's a tradition that has been maintained from ancient times to the present day, even when universal magic education had already been established long ago. What Sidran Gauss was looking for was not just a disciple, but a successor to his life's work and that of those who came before him, given that an 8-circle archmage was still desperately trying to get him to accept the invitation. Dane had gained a lot of confidence in his talent and potential. He could feel an unknown sensation stirring in his body. Now that he had familiarized himself with the basics of magic, he remembered a gift Arabella left him a few years ago. It was a crystal ball that he could use if he wanted to see his sister Anna. At this moment, asking Arabella for her opinion on the matter could be beneficial. Dane dug up the crystal ball and infused it with his magical energy. He called Arabella telepathically, who was studying in the Academy's library. When she finally recognized his voice, she was surprised. Arabella immediately stopped what she was doing and smiled with joy, seeing that her little brother was contacting her. As expected, even Arabella was surprised to hear that Dane managed to use a 1-circle spell without a magic circle. She knew his mana affinity was normally high, but she never expected it to be to this extent. The circle only serves to purify and circulate the energy, so perhaps Dane's mana was already pure enough to be used in its raw form. To test this, Arabella wanted to send a mana stone to the transmission machine in Dane's room to inspect his mana purity. It's a good thing he had Arabella to help him with things like this. Now, she's already an established 6-chain mage, and her help has been incredibly comforting. Arabella thought that since Dane could use chain-level magic, attracting a lot of attention at the Academy would be inevitable, but that's the last thing he wants. However, it can't be helped. Talent always attracts people's attention, but Arabella assured her little brother that she would completely destroy anyone who dared to bother Dane. Speaking of which, a few minutes later, Stones, Dane asked his sister about the news that she had broken a senior student's nose, the second son of the Duchy of Duel. Just thinking about the damn bastard gets on Arabella's nerves. Realizing she was taking the call in a public space, she tried to calm down. Anyway, with enough time, she theorized that Dane's mana purity would continue to increase. It's one of the possibilities they could consider. Unfortunately, their discussion had to be cut short, as Arabella was needed by one of the professors. They said their goodbyes, and she promised to send the aforementioned mana stone. The fact that Dane might be forging a path that had never existed before had finally sunk in for him. With the extraordinary purity of his mana, he joked, wondering if he had a dragon's heart beating in his chest or something. Yes, meanwhile, Sidran was still stuck in the annex for his recovery. He used a bit of mana to inspect Dane, and this worsened his magical backlash. Maybe he'll have to stay longer. If the boy would just accept his offer, he could have the most illustrious legacy among mages. He wondered what he could do to entice the young man to join his side. If Dane wasn't even interested in learning 8-chain magic, perhaps he should offer some great and valuable artifact or pass down a refined heritage through multiple generations. But if he offered his treasures right away, Sidran could be scammed and left with nothing. While he was racking his brain for ideas, Dane already. There was a knock on the door. Zedrin wondered if the boy was coming to apologize or if perhaps he had even changed his mind about the offer. Dane came to see the old man because he had something he wanted to say. Yes, he did. Kane immediately assumed that the young man had finally reconsidered becoming his disciple, but Dane quickly shut that nonsense down. Whoa, it's not like he has no interest in magic. Sidri asked if he already had a master or something, and that's why he kept refusing, but that's not the case either. Thinking he was just being played, Sidri asked what the young man wanted to talk about. It's simple, really. Dane didn't know the rearrangement code for double-chain magic yet. Learning from his sister would be difficult, as she's far away. In the end, the best method would be to learn from Sidran, a literal archmage. The old man still owes him for the rescue, so refusing his request outright won't be possible. Moreover, Dane admitted to the old man that he doesn't want to just follow the path of a mage. He wasn't going to just become a magic lancer either. He wanted to become an assassin, summoner, and magic lancer. As far as Psydrain knows, something as crazy as that doesn't even exist. Heck, Dane would even add Chinese sword. It's that title too. The absurdity of the young man's aspirations completely frustrated Psydrain. To achieve that long title, Dane had to draw a line and refuse to become the disciple of the old head of the magic tower. Based on the young man's determination, Psydrain could see that Dane's mind was already made up. Then an idea came to him. The old mage stood up and asked if Dane would be interested in a letter of recommendation. Since he wanted to enter the academy, getting a letter of recommendation from the former director of the Nision Magic Tower would be a huge boost to his reputation. Dane thought about it briefly and considered that it wasn't a bad offer by any means. So he accepted the recommendation letter, and while they were at it, he wanted to make another request. Psydrain laughed silently to himself, thinking that the young man had finally come around. He could finally begin to secure his hold on an unparalleled genius. Likewise, since the old man was feeling generous, Dane asked if he could learn the rearrangement code for two-string magic. That wouldn't be a big problem for someone like Psydrain. He knew the rearrangement code for all existing two-string magic. After all, Dane is still young. Giving him a recommendation letter for the academy and some two-string magic codes was no big deal. Although he wasn't in his best condition right now, 2, Psydrain could start his lessons right away. 3, Psydrain smiled to himself mischievously, as he had just landed a big catch. He extended his hand and declared that with everything on the table, they could consider Psydrain's debt for being saved paid in full. The old bat said it himself. Since he owed Dane great gratitude, he could ask for anything, so here he is asking for what he wants. Psydrain didn't like being manipulated this way. He really thought he was finally getting a disciple. Dane's answer to his invitation remained the same. The old hag was tricked by a 12-year-old boy. Refusing to back down, Psydrain insisted that the young man asked for 2 things when he only owed Dane 1 thing. However, the young man disagreed. First, he saved the unconscious old man from the forest. Second, he neutralized the poison that was ravaging Psydrain's body. 2, he could have added the fact that he had to carry the unconscious old man all the way back to the annex, but he would consider it a bonus. 3, Psydrain had no more comebacks. He was completely and logically defeated. 4, he wondered how such a bold child could exist in this world. Finally, Psydrain and Dane set up their lessons in the training hall. The old man had partially accepted that he might not get Dane as an official disciple, but he could continue to win the boy's favor in case he changed his mind in the future. He just couldn't bear to let such a talent go. A waste! The lecture finally began. They would have to work around Dane using string-level magic without a circle. The young man would have to pay close attention, as the rearrangement code for 2-string magic is much more complicated than for 1 string. There are countless aspiring mages who can't even make progress and end up quitting. Dane was focused, glad to have such an experienced instructor, as Dumbledore saw the sparkle in the boy's eyes and made sure not to be lenient. Dumbledore still had to maintain his reputation as an archmage after all. 2 chain codes are on a completely different level because the caster has to calculate the amount of mana himself, the magical density in the atmosphere, and even the body's condition play a vital role. At the same time, the complicated nature of magic is the reason why most people give up completely. Sidrine gave the complex definition, hoping that Dane would ask for a simpler explanation. When he asked the young man if he needed any clarification, Dane just smiled and let him continue. For Dane, learning not only about the reorganization of magic codes, but also information he had no clue about, was eye-opening. To make sure he truly understood the principle, Sidrine asked him to discuss the laws of magic rearrangement. According to the young man's notes, the first law was 4. Coexistence. Magical power can exist in the physical world and with other sources of mana. Through coexistence, mages use their own power and the magical power of their surroundings to activate their magic. The second law is conservation. If magical power can gather enough of a particular elemental material, it can exhibit different attributes through conservation. Din not only has a deep understanding of the nature of magic, but is also adding his own interpretations. Most people would find magic theory boring, but that was not the case for the young man at all. He had talent, tools, and a hunger for knowledge. How could such a perfect candidate for a mage exist? Continuing the class, Sogres explained that magic codes become exponentially more complicated each time the chain increases. Instead of discussing theory, it would be easier to demonstrate it. Sogres skillfully summoned a small amount of his mana and made a simple magic grid to demonstrate a one-chain magic cast using the simplest rules. However, the complexity increases starting from 2 chains. He transformed the small portion of mana into a swirl of runes and power, showing the rearrangement code for 2-chain magic. Dane concentrated on the brilliant display and focused on how complicated the knots were. Dryan manipulated his code and formed the 2-chain fire magic, Fire Arrow. When it comes to magic codes, using them repeatedly is the key to mastering them. The old man thought that Dryan was finally recognizing how complex magic can be. According to his estimation, most people would take at least 1 year to go from a 1-chain code to a 2-chain one, no matter how brilliant someone is. The human mind can only understand a part of the code at a time. Drane noted that he could observe Dane's progress for about 1 week while he taught him the technique of mastering 2-chain codes little by little, but Dane already wanted to try it. Drane saw no harm in it, expecting the boy to fail miserably. But when Dane began to call his mana out of his body to create the first code, he felt like he was witnessing a master. In action, the young man focused and used his hands to manipulate the pure mana swirling in the air. Finally, he formed the same grid that Drane demonstrated as the primary form of a code chain, based on lines of a set width with astonishing precision. The old man was deeply impressed. Dane could have stopped there and he would have been considered an undisputed genius, but where's the fun in that? He went further and deconstructed the mana grid to slowly form a swirling chaos of mana in the air. Drane was stunned to see a perfect replica of the reorganization code for the 2-chain magic he had just demonstrated. Once, when asked how he did it so quickly, he simply replied that he copied it through observation and memorizing rules and patterns, and he pictured every factor in his mind as he formed the magic code. It came surprisingly easy to him. Cedron was amazed time and time again, even though he, as a genius of magic, took a while to reach 2 chains. A boy without a magic circle accomplished it easily in just 1 or 2 minutes, as if trying to give the old man a heart attack. Dane declared that he would also try to use the Fire Arrow spell, and made the mana and runes move around his body at impeccable speeds. Finally, he managed to reorganize the code in perfect order to manifest multiple fire arrows. Drane stared at the perfectly crafted fire arrows, refusing to believe what he was seeing. Seeing what this boy was capable of was driving the old man into an existential crisis. If only he had possessed Dane's talent. Growing up, he would have long ago achieved his dream of 9 chains. Dane freely controlled the fire arrows, making them fly all over the training room, while the old archmage tried to compose himself. Even Dane was surprised that it all came so naturally in one go. One thing was certain: the world would go crazy when they saw a circle-less mage performing magical miracles. Drane knew that Dane's talent would have to be hidden before all sorts of people tried to approach him with impure intentions. Besides, he still hadn't given up on making the boy his disciple. Since Dane understood the first code so easily, they could just move on and learn even more codes. Drane thought he might have to be careful about what he included in Dane's letter of recommendation for the academy. At the end of the day, Dane lay in bed reflecting on his magic lesson. He resolved to properly learn both theory and practice, thinking about his past life. He had been forced into a life where he didn't even have the option to learn magic, under circumstances where he didn't even know when he would die in battle. Trying to make time to learn magic was a luxury he couldn't afford. His hands were full swinging his sword and trying to survive while doing so. To some extent, magic prioritized theoretical learning over casting practice. In this life, he had the time, resources, and talent to look forward to learning many more things. Dane could combine the theory he learned from Arabe and the talent he was born with, and now He could even show explosive growth if given simple guidance. Since he was being taught by a former tower master, he found himself anticipating what kind of magic he would learn in the coming days. Half a month later, Dane went to his father with a request to make something called a magic reagent. Since they didn't have the materials, he would have to leave the territory. His father was a little surprised by his son's progress. Sidrain supported Dane by assuring the Count of Sogres that Dane was ready for a reagent. Now that he'd already mastered 4 reorganization codes, usually for geniuses it should take 1 month to learn 1 code. Count Sogres also understood that magic reagents were hard to come by. Dane only learned about them while reading books in the family's magic library about magic reagents. Finally, the Count agreed with the plan, believing it would be a great experience for his son. Since he was going out, Dane could also see his territory for himself. He smiled and thanked his father for trusting him to venture out. Dane embarked on a short journey to the outer regions of the Sogres territory. With him were Sidrain and German. Even on the outskirts, the people of Sogres County still looked at him and spoke of him with reverence. Dane returned their kind feelings with kindness and a smile. On this trip, Sidrain assessed that the Count of Sogres must be a kind lord to his subjects based on how happy the people were. The South really has a lot to offer. They have delicious snacks, good mornings, good weather, and good people. It's also a sight that is extremely rare to see in the capital. That's why Dane loved this territory so much. His small caravan had been traveling around the area for a while, trying to get to the magic supply shop. Dane had never been to the shop before, so he called German to lead the way. The 3 of them sped up and quickly reached their destination. The magic shop's shopkeeper was surprised to see the famous young master Dane enter her humble business. She complimented him on his silver hair and stunning emerald eyes, and Dane thanked her. Not many people from the fiefdoms come to her shop to buy magic supplies lately. Fortunately, she has been able to get by thanks to many foreigners interested in magic. The shop owner also recognized Sidrain, the former lord of the magic tower, and expressed how grateful she was to have him in her shop. The old man was in a good mood, now that someone had finally recognized him. She invited the duo to explore her merchandise freely and told them to call her if they needed help with anything. Since it was Dane's first time in a magic shop, Sidrain encouraged him to look at whatever he wanted while the old man spoke with the shopkeeper. With a quick glance, Dane could already see many interesting things on display. They had potions, gems, charms, and all sorts of magical items. Although it seemed a little strange to him that he felt a kind of déjà vu, he also discovered that touching the items showed him their magical reaction. He simply attributed it to his high affinity and continued to explore. Suddenly, a faint sound of bells echoed in his ears, as if demanding his attention. He could feel a particularly strong reaction from one side of the shop, just as he approached that section. The owner informed him that everything on that side was just decorative items. She called Dane over so they could take a look together at some potion ingredients that the old man had already selected. Some raw materials like moon root, which could be used in at least 50 different potions. The owner assured them that her ingredients were personally processed with the highest quality. Meanwhile, Dane was too fascinated by the strange item. As he walked deeper into the pile of decorations, he felt a strange power calling to him. He turned around to see a piece of stone that was emitting pure mana. It must have also been the source of the ringing. Dane hurriedly approached the stone as if his body was moving on its own. German, seeing his young master behaving strangely, rushed over in concern. To him, his young master was simply staring at a simple rock embedded in the wall as a decoration. He wasn't entirely sure what was happening, but the stone was undoubtedly calling to him. He pried it from the wall and held it in his hands. As he suspected, imbuing the stone with more magic made the reaction even stronger. There was a chance that the object was reacting uniquely to his magic. Meanwhile, old Sidrain was still gathering raw materials from here and there. Dane went over and asked the shop owner what the story was behind the stone he had just pulled from the wall. As the owner had said before, it was just a decoration. But what kind of decoration has a stronger magical reaction than anything else in the shop? Sidrain asked if the owner had been scammed with the rock or something, and she admitted that a few years ago a peddler gave her a large package as payment. When she opened it with excitement, she found the plain stone inside. She held out hope and asked a mage to appraise the stone, but it was confirmed to be just an ordinary rock. Based on Dane's interaction with the object, it clearly wasn't a normal rock. The owner urged the young master to focus on her other products and some special magical artifacts instead of wasting his time on a rock. She tried to sell him many valuable magical artifacts of all kinds, but Dane was still fascinated by the strange stone in his hand. It was the only thing he wanted. She showed him a card with a name that automatically reads and stores all kinds of information to be cataloged. In the end, Dane bought the scroll card and the useless stone. He was sure it wasn't an item he could just leave behind. Even Sidrin was confused about what was going on in the young man's mind. On the way back, the old bat curiously asked if Dane was interested in decorative art or if he truly believed there was something special about the stone. When he explained that the stone slab reacted to his magic, Sidron kept an open mind. Although he didn't see anything special, his curiosity was definitely piqued. Since there were too many people on the streets, the small caravan hurried back to the castle. Sidron set up a priceless experimentation tool to help Dane discover what the stone really was. He was sure he could appraise the stone accurately. Still, a mage had already appraised it and found nothing noteworthy. Sidron arrogantly declared that no mage appraiser was better than the tool. He had invested all his funds in this state-of-the-art device for appraisals. He was confident it could analyze anything that was placed on top of it. Both of them were quite eager to see what was up with the seemingly ordinary stone slab. Sidron placed the object on the platform and instructed Dane to imbue his magic into the slab to stimulate a reaction. When Dane did just that, the stone immediately began to radiate a densely rich amount of magical power. It lit up in the middle of the evaluation tool. Its glow swirled, forming something complex, as Sidron carefully observed the burst of light. Keeping his eyes on the stone slab, seeing that his tool had successfully revealed the mystery within the stone, Sidron could finally hold his head high again after being humiliated by the boy so many times. The mana that flowed from the slab danced around the room, forming runes in the air. Dane immediately understood what they were seeing. As he had been learning about these things with Sidron for weeks, inside the stone was a magical code. But the old bat declared that it was no ordinary code. It was incredible. Floating around them was a code whose structure, arrangement, and intricacies were unlike anything ever seen before. It was so complex, like a 6-string or even a 7-string code. So the magic stone had a hidden code inside, and Dane's magic seemed to hold the key to unlocking it. The stone only responded to his mana. Sure, they had managed to extract the code, but deciphering what it was and why it only reacted to Dane's magic was a completely different challenge. Even Sidron, who was an expert in the magical arts, was unfamiliar with this particular type of magic. But his pride as a mage made him determined to crack the code if he managed to succeed. They could discover what made Dane's magic so unique, while Dane and Sidron worked arduously to decipher the magic. At the Sogres training ground, Arabella was busy conducting her own research in her personal laboratory. Her lab was filled with books and artifacts from her various studies, all neatly arranged. Arabella had stored her little brother's mana signature in a magic stone and confirmed that there was something unusual about Dane's power. His magic had a distinctive characteristic, one that didn't match any known form of magic. She performed numerous tests and studied countless research papers. However, she still couldn't identify which magical field this anomaly belonged to. She had tried everything: magical reagents, magic gates, magical engineering, and still nothing provided an answer. But she was convinced the truth was out there, hidden somewhere. Then suddenly, she remembered hearing about a long-lost field of magic, one that had vanished from the magical world. Perhaps Dane's magic was related to this field. Carefully, Arabella began to rummage through her piles of books and literature, trying to remember where she had stored that ancient tome. It was a book that discussed alchemy and divination, spiritualism, necromancy, and a primitive form of magical code. As she searched excitedly, another dusty tome fell from the shelves. She picked it up, noticing it was an ancient book of magic. Come to think of it, she had once studied the lost magical kingdom of Arcana, a civilization said to have existed more than 2,000 years ago and inherited ancient magic from a previous era. They were said to practice forms of magic that no longer existed. Arabella laughed to herself, dismissing the idea. Ancient magic had disappeared long ago. There was no way Dane's magic could be connected to such a relic of the past. But at this point, she had nothing to lose. So she decided to try something unconventional. She placed the magic crystal containing Dane's mana into her magic typewriter, and she consulted the ancient book of magic after a few moments of concentration. Arabella's eyes widened in surprise. The crystal was reacting. She quickly wrote down the mana's properties, her mind racing, as she wondered if Dane's magic might be linked to alchemy, divination, or something completely different. Arabella would be fine with any result, as long as it didn't lead her brother toward necromancy. When she finished analyzing the findings, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. All she could say was, "What in the world are these findings?" Back at the Sogres training grounds, Dane and Sodrain were still working hard, trying to get more reactions from the stone. After some time, Sodrain finally broke the seal on the slab. Inside the slab was something. A separate space. The old man carefully extended his hand and pulled out the object. It was a simple accessory, a silver bracelet emitting a dense, magical power to the untrained eye. It looked like an ordinary bracelet you might find at a market. Sodrain initially thought there might be something special about the bracelet's material, but it seemed mundane. Since the stone only responded to Dane's mana, Sodrain suspected the same would be true for the bracelet. Dane slipped the bracelet onto his wrist. It hung loosely at first, seemingly too large for him. But then the reaction came, the bracelet lit up, resonating with the magic in Dane's body. As expected, it only responded to him. Dane started to see strange characters emerge from the bracelet, glowing faintly. Sodrain leaned in for a closer look, as Dane anxiously asked if the old mage could decipher the symbols. To Dane's surprise, Sodrain's face lit up with a broad smile. The characters were ancient runes, characters that no one in the current world could read. According to Sodrain, it was the language of the lost kingdom of Arcaina. Dane only knew a little about Arcaina from what Arabella had told him when they were children. She had described it as an age when magic ruled over every aspect of life. But then suddenly, and mysteriously, the age of magical prosperity ended, leaving behind only a few relics and legends. And now, this strange line of magic code sealed inside a stone had been added to the ancient puzzle. Sodrain knew Dane's magic was special, but he never imagined it was linked to the ancient kingdom of Arcaina. This revelation only intensified Sodrain's desire to take Dane as his apprentice. After all, it was rumored that the Forest of the Last Days, which had defeated even Sodrain, was permeated with remnants of Arcaina's destructive magic. Dane's connection to this ancient power now made sense. Unfortunately, all they had at the moment were those few lines of indecipherable text. So Sodrain urged Dane to take his time and delve deeper into this mystery, but he warned him to keep it a secret for now. Suddenly, their quiet moment of study was interrupted. A terrifying sound echoed throughout the Sogres territory, causing both of them to widen their eyes in distress. Something horrifying was approaching. The familiar sound of an alarm takes them by surprise. And it doesn't take the old man long to realize it must be an attack alarm. Monster. Well, that's enough to get him going, because now that his body is almost completely healed, he's itching to flex his old muscles and get his blood pumping. Plus, it's a great opportunity to repay the ogres for their hospitality. The old man, excited, quickly tells Dane not to just stand there and to grab a spear or something. But Dane just stands there with little to no expression, silently reaching into his coat, and pulls out a pendant. Dwayne raises an eyebrow and asks about the object he's holding and why the monster alarm sound is coming from it. Dane then explains to this excited old man that the sound has nothing to do with monsters. It actually means his older sister is trying to contact him. The old man's excitement deflates like a popped balloon, and he grumbles at Dane for not mentioning it sooner. Dan just laughs awkwardly, reminding the old man that it goes without saying there's no reason for monsters to be in this area. Then Dane decides to answer his sister's call, while the old man stands there with a disappointed look on his face. Upon connecting, his sister immediately asks why he took so long to answer. He simply apologizes and asks about the reason for her call. She starts spilling some juicy details about his magic code, but quickly stops herself, asking if someone is beside him. The mere mention of the magic code was enough for Dane to realize that she had actually discovered his magic is ancient magic. The old man overhears this conversation and lets out a shrill cry of disbelief, demanding to know how the hell she found out about that. As they continue talking, he also explains his side of the story, that when he and Sidran were analyzing some stones, they also discovered that his magic belongs to the ancient magic realm. They realized this because that stone only reacts to his magic, which was a total giveaway. The old man, on the other hand, grits his teeth in pure frustration. The fact that she figured this out just by analyzing his magic is incredible. He knew she was a genius, but her talent seems to be greater than he had imagined. Arabella then asks her brother if anyone else knows about his secret. Dane quickly replies no. She breathes a sigh of relief and tells Dane and Sidran to keep it a secret, because if it gets out, he won't be able to handle the consequences. She then apologizes to Sidran for not introducing herself first before starting the conversation. The old man just laughs, saying he already knows a lot about her, thanks to Dane. As for keeping Dane's magic a secret, he assures her that he won't let a single soul know. If this information gets out, not only would Dane be in trouble, but the entire Sogres house would be caught in the massive fallout. Arabella gives the old man credit for grasping the gist of the situation immediately, which of course is to be expected from the wise Sidran. The old man then asks her if this exchange is being recorded, to which she replies no, saying that the moment the conversation ends, it will be deleted immediately. Well, that's good news. At least they don't have to worry about anything leaking. The old man then reveals that he also plans to return to the magic tower to investigate this matter. Arabella thanks him for the gesture as he tries. He downplays it, insisting that as a mage, he does it out of a sense of duty, so there's no need for her to feel so indebted. Speaking of the magic tower, the old man reveals that he heard she was looking for a tower to join, and asks if she has decided which one she wants to go to. Arabella quickly realizes he's hinting for her to join his tower, so she tries to dodge the question, saying that she's not considering the Nixon Magic Tower because it doesn't specialize in the field she's interested in. Of course, this leaves the old man annoyed once again. He was already wondering where Dane's cleverness came from, and it seems he inherited it from his sister. However, he doesn't express his frustration. Instead, he just laughs, saying that she doesn't have to join his magic tower after all. Meanwhile, Dane feels a bit worried watching this old man, especially since his sister was so blunt with her words. Anyway, she decides to end the conversation by telling him they can talk about the details later. After exchanging greetings, she cuts the connection. Yeah, Dane comments on how impressive his sister has become, a point which Dane himself agrees with, mentioning that the artifact in front of them was also made by her. He adds that this compact crystal ball is popular among young mages. The old man smiles and admits that it's quite impressive, but we can also see the frustration on his face when he says he doesn't need such an item. He explains that when you reach the 8th chain, wasting time talking to people isn't something mages do. Well, Dane can sense why the old man is saying this. Dumb point. This. The fact that this grumpy old man doesn't want a modern item like that just suggests he has no friends. Later, Dane tells his parents all about the ancient magic, and his mother seems quite worried hearing this, but his father reassures them by saying that if anyone messes with Dane, they'll make them pay. His mother agrees, saying that she won't hold back when it comes to her son's safety. Once again, Dane feels a bit uncomfortable with their intense protective instincts, but he has to admit that there's nothing safer than being looked after by the two of them. Sogres then states that if what Dane said is true, that means their bloodline possesses ancient magic. Patente, his wife, acknowledges it and also wants to know if any of their ancestors had it. She decides to investigate her side of the family first. The matter is quite intriguing, and Dane can't help but wonder what might be unearthed if both sides of the family investigated. This, although it's not really important to him, still makes him curious. Anyway, his mother reminds him that he has already surpassed his limits in many ways. If he stays here, it could slow down his growth, so he should consider gradually heading to the capital. The mention of the capital surprises him, and his parents also remind him that he needs to be at least 14 years old to enter the academy. Now that he's that age, he shouldn't waste any more time. Sogres makes it clear that he wanted to keep Dane for another year or two before sending him off, but it doesn't seem like there's anything left for him to learn here. His mother reassuringly places her hand on his and tells him he can leave whenever he wants, emphasizing that the decision is completely his to make. Dane is surprised to see this because he didn't expect them to have already accepted. The fact that he needs to leave this place, his father is sure his son will make him proud. And he encourages him to go and make the most of his talents. Dane smiles at this. Saying that he understands where they're both coming from, he promises to prepare to enter the academy. The family of three smiles as they make the decision, and by this time, Dane is also excited to finally move on to the next level in his life. Later, Dane tells Sogres about his decision to leave the mansion. The old man asks if it's really his choice to leave, and Dane confirms it, although he admits it's a bit earlier than he had initially planned. The old man also expresses his support for Dane's decision, saying that having his talent restricted here would be a waste of potential. He also gives Dane a piece of advice that he shouldn't reveal too much about his talents all at once to other people because while the academy welcomes talent, not everyone thinks that way, and there are people who could get jealous. However, Dane is already aware of this because Arabella had warned him about it and mentioned some scandalous situations she herself had encountered. The old man also states that it's difficult for mediocre people to thrive at the academy, given the environment, but he assures Dane that House Termion is not one of them. Speaking of House Termion, Dane quickly remembers Layla and the promise he made to visit her once he gets to the capital. He knows that if he doesn't visit her, she would be very disappointed in him. He also remembers the crest that Duke Termion gave him, so he plans to think about what kind of weapon he wants before heading there. The old man then reminds him that there are 3 months until he enters the academy, so he should plan to leave here in 2 months. Dane acknowledges this and returns the question, asking the old man about his own plans. Sogres replies that he's going back to the magic tower because he has something he needs to attend to. He expresses his gratitude to Dane for helping him relieve his boredom, and, as a gesture of goodwill, he wants to return the favor by informing Dane about any clues regarding this ancient magic. Dane is quite grateful to hear this. The old man points out that now Dane has little time left here. Lessons should be his main concern if Dane wants to speed up the process to finish the lessons early, but warns Dane that the third chain is considerably more difficult than the second chain by 10 years. Dane promises to study hard to reach that level. Dane then says he has prepared a gift for the old man. Sogres perks up at this, clearly curious about what the gift could be. Dane quickly pulls out a box and tells the old man that he received it yesterday from his sister. Using teleportation magic, he explains that it's a very popular item among young people right now. Now, this particular model is a new compact crystal ball that hasn't been released yet. He adds that Arabella developed this new product and he pulled some strings to get it as a favor. The old man quickly picks up the stone and seems absolutely thrilled to have it. He praises how pretty the stone looks, and although he claims he doesn't need something like it, he still says he will gladly accept Dane's gift. He has prepared, no matter how much the old man denies it. The expression on his face makes it clear that he's totally excited to have this product for himself. Dane himself then spends his time explaining to the old man how to use the crystal, just like any teenager would teach their grandmother. When night falls and he returns to his room, he reflects on everything he has to do in the 2 months he has left. He reveals to us that his main interest is in summoning, so he decides to set his mind on taking official summoning classes, receiving a summoning sign, and having the opportunity to take the qualification exam. Since Claire is an assistant professor, he's hopeful that he might see her often when he's attending classes. Speaking of summoning, he remembers that he almost forgot to infuse his familiar with magic, so he quickly takes the egg and transfers some of his magic into it. You see, for 7 years straight, Dane has diligently infused the egg with magic every morning and night, but there's still no response. However, since the magic he's pouring in isn't going anywhere else and is being absorbed by the familiar, he's sure that the egg will hatch someday. The next scene transitions to the academy, where students are chatting about the entrance exams, which come in the form of 2 tests. One is a common exam, while the second is a specialization exam. The common exam is a type of prep test focused on knowledge about culture, the Empire's history, and more, but Dane shouldn't have any problems with it, thanks to Arabella. She informs her brother of the details through the crystal and assures him that doing well on this exam is important, as it will influence his admission score. After that, there's the specialization exam. As the name suggests, you have to choose a specialty and take a test, and the content depends on the professor. But Arabella is confident that this part will also be a piece of cake for him. Dane remembers that Arabella passed that exam quite easily, and she just smiles, saying, "Yeah, it was a piece of cake for me." Then, she reveals that once he chooses a major, he can't change it. So he must choose carefully from the beginning. She mentions that she would really appreciate it if he chose magic. As Dane swings his sword on the training ground, he can't help but crack an awkward smile, seeing how she still hasn't given up on trying to persuade him to join the magic program. To get rid of her, he tells her he'll think about it, then asks if there's really no other way to change his specialty after enrolling. As she mentioned, Arabella explains that's usually how it works. The only real option is to graduate and then come back, although he can still take classes from other majors, but once he's in his 3rd year, they usually don't allow students who aren't in that major to take advanced classes from another major. In other words, he has one chance to choose a major. She also explains that for someone as talented as him, there's an autonomous major system. Dane is quite fascinated to hear this and asks how it differs from regular majors. His sister casually tells him that unless he plans on failing, she would advise him not to apply there because no one has managed to pass that exam so far, but it seems Dane has already set his sights on it. And the way he pauses for a moment tells his sister that he's really considering something daring. But he quickly assures her that he's not going to do anything reckless, and with that, he decides to contact her later. Once the call ends, Arabella wonders if she's being too pushy about him joining the magic program. Still, she thinks it's the best option he has, just at that moment. A student approaches her to tell her that the professor is looking for her. Later, we see that Sidrain has prepared a letter of recommendation for Dane, just as he promised, and Dane is really happy to see that he actually wrote it for him. The old man feels proud as he tells Dane that he put extra thought and care into drafting the recommendation letter. He didn't just write the usual generic lines. Instead, he made sure it looked impressive and that the words truly reflected Dane's strengths and potential. For Sidrain, it was a sincere effort to support Dane, something he doesn't always do to this extent, so he advises Dane to feel a little honored. Dane quickly smiles and promises Sidrain that he will live up to his expectations, but the old man grumbles, a bit annoyed, that it would have been much better if Dane had agreed to become his disciple. He says their current relationship is technically that of a disciple and master, but he's not sure if Dane will ever acknowledge him as a true master. Well, it seems the old man has a point, because the awkward smile Dane gives him shows that he doesn't really want to think of him that way. Anyway, the old man asks if Dane has finished his preparations, to which Dane confirms that he doesn't need to bring much with him. He mentions that the Academy's dorms are equipped with everything they need. Sidrain agrees that the facilities there are great. However, he adds that only a few have a monopoly on them. And with that said, there's no way Dane will lose to those arrogant nobles. Dane laughs awkwardly because, from what he's heard, the Academy has become a gathering place for the nobles' bullies. Sidrain warns him to keep one thing in mind. That place is where numerous guys will show their fangs if they think he's looking down on them. Dane reflects on this and realizes it's like the law of the battlefield, something he's quite familiar with. He assures the old man that he will keep it in mind. Sidrain then gives him permission to contact him whenever he needs anything. Now that he has that compact crystal, he better use it well. Upon hearing this, Dane realizes that Sidrain must be leaving soon, to which the old man quickly agrees and is quite surprised that Dane can guess it correctly. He reminds Dane that it would be problematic for him to stay here, since his father has offered him a position as a magic advisor, but that's something to think about later. When he really has nothing else to do, Sidrain is sure that Dane will understand his situation, especially since there's a lot to do in the magic tower. It doesn't take long for Dane to realize that he must be talking about researching ancient magic. The old man then thanks Dane, and our boy returns the gesture, thanking the old man for all the time he has invested in a guy like him. They both share a smile, looking forward to seeing each other again, and the grumpy old man can't wait to see how much Dane is going to grow in the future. With that, the old man starts to walk away, telling Dane not to come out to see him off because it would be a bit awkward. Dane wishes him a good trip, but he can't help feeling a little sad inside, as he has grown quite fond of the old man. The next day, Dane's father asks if he'll be leaving now that Sidron has departed safely. Dane confirms that he has finished all his preparations, then his father comments to his wife that with their son also leaving, the castle will feel very empty. But his wife quickly reassures him. She tells him not to be too sad about it, because contrary to appearances, she feels relieved that Dane is finally leaving. Her main concern is that she doesn't want him to face difficulties on his trip to the academy. Her husband assures her that since Dane will use the teleportation gate that Arabella arranged, nothing should go wrong. The doting mother smiles, admitting she's just worrying for nothing. After all, in any case, she feels very proud of herself for raising her children. Well, especially compared to other houses, where the children are busy fighting among themselves over the succession. The father comments that the day will also come for House Sogres, and they will have to make a decision. But he believes that no matter which of the brothers takes over, either one would be suitable for the succession. Just at that moment, Dane enters the room and his parents greet him kindly. His father asks if he is ready to leave, while his mother asks if he is taking Nightthorn and the mark she gave him. Dane gives them a bright smile, confirming that he has them. His mother then reminds him to take the mark to the place she told him about and show it to them when he thinks he needs help getting out of trouble. Dane acknowledges this, saying that he will keep it in mind. Although he is curious about these people, he wonders if they are her former colleagues or friends, to which his mother replies that they are some of her closest colleagues. She mentions that it has been quite some time since she last saw them, but she is sure they would be more than willing to help. As soon as Count Sogres hears the conversation between mother and son, his face tenses up. He looked almost as if he was suffering from serious constipation, worried that if Dane follows his mother's advice, he might end up on the path of a hitman. So he quickly intervenes, telling his son to look for Duke Termion as soon as he arrives in the capital. The Duke will help him until he gets into the academy. At this point, Dane's doting mother begins to cry. It's sad to see her son all grown up and now leaving. Her husband gently reminds her that there is no need for tears and suggests that she send him off with smiles and good wishes. Meanwhile, Dane steels himself, for although he had planned to leave, he had always felt a bit of reluctance. But now it is finally time to depart. German then escorts him to the teleportation gate. While his father watches from a window, we also see a suspicious figure working under the command of Count Sogres. The Count tells his man, Gilad, to follow Dane carefully and ensure he reaches the teleportation gate safely. Gilad acknowledges the order and sets off. Meanwhile, in another room in the castle, Dane's doting mother has also summoned her familiar, known as Sombra, as expected. She gives him the same order that Sogres gave his man, which is to ensure Dane teleports safely. Sombra takes the order and immediately sets off. Once Dane arrives at the portal site, German is surprised to see the huge machine for the first time. And it's huge. Dane also acknowledges how truly magnificent it is. The butler comments on how amazing Lady Arabella seems, to which Dane nods, saying he understands why it took her a whole year to build this. Excitedly, the butler asks if just stepping on the platform will activate the teleportation. Dane confirms with a yes. He marvels at how much effort she must have put into it, because teleportation magic isn't like other types. It requires a precise arrangement of codes, and magic must be continuously imbued while the code is rearranged before it casts the spell, finally making the gate that Arabella installed possible. It's a perfect device where all the conditions for teleportation are met. He turns to German, then wishes him good luck and tells him to take care. Dane returns the gesture and starts walking towards the portal. As soon as he steps in, he decides to pour magic into the portal to activate it, just as his sister suggested. Once he does this, the gate opens and a blue arcane energy envelops him. As the teleportation happens, the scene shifts to a bustling street where everyone is busy with their lives. In the middle of it all, we see our boy on his horse. A big smile spreads across his face as he realizes this is the entrance to the capital city, Artemia. As he moves through the crowd, an unfamiliar voice calls out to him, saying that he has been waiting for him. The man in front of him appears to be a knight and quickly introduces himself as Luis Kazmar, captain of the 1st Knight Corps of House Termion. Seeing the captain of the knights come out personally to greet him is a bit overwhelming for Dane. He never expected this to happen. The knight declares that he and his retinue will escort Dane from this point forward. At that moment, he turns his head and orders his knights to secure the route, and the soldiers acknowledge the orders without any hesitation. As they walk, Dane is glad to be under Luis Kazmar's care, and the knight feels honored to escort him. Dane starts to feel a strange sensation in his chest. He never thought he would enter the heart of the very Asian empire he had hated so much, and here he is as the most promising person as well. As they move deeper into the city proper, Dane hears the street vendors trying to sell their goods and is surprised to see that this place really has everything. He didn't expect the capital to be so bustling. The knight then reveals that they are finally walking through the Castermion estate. This cheers Dane up, and when he looks ahead, he is absolutely astonished by the magnificence of the place. However, he can't shake the feeling that something is wrong, as if someone is watching him, making him wonder if he's imagining things. As Dane approaches the entrance, the servants of the house greet him warmly, leaving him completely amazed. They are in a line, perfectly lined up. Their etiquette and dedication to their roles is perfect and natural. It's quite different from what he's used to in the southern region. Once Dane finally comes face to face with the Duke, it ends. He promptly greets the head of the house and drops to the floor to pay his respects. Termion warmly accepts the greeting and invites him in, eager to hear all the juicy details about his tiring journey. Once inside, Termion comments on how much Dane has changed since he last saw him 7 years ago. He's sure that even kids 1 or 2 years older than Dane wouldn't compare to the charisma and aura he has, and he's certain that Count Sogres must be a proud father. Additionally, he states that while this place might not be up to par with Count Sogres' castles, he tells Dane to enjoy his stay until the academy entrance exam. Furthermore, he promises to assign a servant to Dane who would fulfill any wish he has. Dane thanks him and asks about Layla, wondering what she's been up to and how she's doing. Termion says she's fine, for the most part, but he asks if Dane has had any disagreements with her recently. Dane asks what he means by that, and Termion explains that nowadays, whenever Dane's name is mentioned, Layla always seems a bit unpleasant. Dane quickly says he doesn't remember having any disagreements with Layla, period. Termion takes this into account and assumes it might be due to the pressure she's feeling from the entrance exam, but he's confident that someone like Layla will pass it easily. Meanwhile, Dane wonders what could have caused her to act so strangely and thinks that maybe it's just a phase related to puberty. Termion then decides to give Dane some time to rest, suggesting they can catch up later, but he hints that Dane should be nice. Dane, of course, doesn't understand what that's supposed to mean. Termion quickly assures him he'll find out soon enough once the servant escorts Dane to his room. He looks around and thinks about how he'll be staying here for 1 week until the entrance exam. However, he notices that the room is a bit extravagant for a guest room. He just drops his bag and decides to unpack before finding the training grounds. At that moment, we see Our Lady entering the room uninvited and deciding to take him to the training grounds. As soon as this voice enters Dane's ears, it doesn't take him long to recognize who is behind him. And as soon as he turns around, he sees Layla. It seems she's grown a lot since the last time he saw her, and her growth in certain areas is definitely noticeable. She looks annoyed and asks why he took so long to arrive, clearly frustrated that he made her wait all these days. Dane can't help but burst with happiness when he sees her and jumps right in to ask how she's been. Layla replies that she's been doing super great, but before he can catch up, he has to deal with her fury. She's absolutely furious that he didn't write her any letters for a long time, even though he promised he would. She demands to know why he didn't even bother to write her a single letter in the past few years, or at least let her know when he would be arriving. Dane, looking a bit clueless, admits that he completely forgot to inform her and apologizes for it. Of course, Layla isn't satisfied with his half-hearted apology. He tries to remind her that at least he actually showed up as he promised. explaining that he was very busy preparing to come to the capital and forgot about everything else. He begs her to let it go just this once, but unsurprisingly, she pouts like a stubborn wife. And Dane can clearly see the annoyance etched on her face, so he asks if there's anything he can do to make it up to her. He apologizes again and promises to do whatever she asks. Layla raises an eyebrow, asking if he is for real. He just gives her an awkward smile and decides to agree with whatever she says. To deflect some of her anger, he finally asks what he could do to make up for it. She thinks for a moment and then suggests they have a little sparring match. Dane is surprised by the unexpected request. It definitely wasn't something he was expecting. But he decides to go along with it anyway. Meanwhile, Layla chuckles to herself, clearly feeling proud of herself. She asks if he's sure he won't regret it because she's much stronger now and is no longer that little girl who used to learn how to release mana from him. Dane is surprised by her newfound confidence. It really makes him think she must have grown a lot in the last 7 years to feel this self-assured. Speaking of improvements, he remembers she mentioned winning a competition in one of her letters. Layla is surprised that he remembers and explains that she won the Danter Cup hosted by the royal family. As he recalls, it was a tournament for kids under 15 years old. She confirms this, saying the competition was fierce, and if he had participated, she's sure they would have made it to the finals together. He reassures her by saying they can totally make up for it now. Then she asks if he's sure he wants to spar, since the entrance exam is coming up, and if he gets hurt, it could be problematic for him, sweetie. Dane, plays it cool, saying she doesn't have to worry about that, but still, in his mind, he wonders why they would be getting hurt in the first place. With that settled, she decides to have the practice match tomorrow, since it's already too late for today. When the next day arrives, we find them outside, ready for the showdown. She asks if he has a weapon to practice with because she definitely doesn't want to hear that he's still using a dull weapon. He reminds her that it's just going to be a light spar, so it's normal to use practice weapons, after all. No matter how much she's trained as a warrior, she can't handle every situation. He asks what she would do if she ended up getting hurt during a practice match. She tells him confidently not to worry because they have the best healer in the Empire right here in residence. But Dane brings up a valid point, asking what if something serious happens before the healer can act? Layla stammers for a moment, trying to come up with a response. He tells her that if she wants to use a real blade, she must be mentally prepared for it. She wonders why he's making things so complicated when it's just going to be a small spar. She finally gives in and agrees to use practice weapons. She instructs one of the servants to bring some practice weapons. While the servant goes to get them, Dane watches her and feels genuinely happy to see how confident she is. Just like the rumors say, it won't be long before she reaches the status of her two older brothers, who are both active knights. There's even a good chance that House Termion might soon see its first female family head. Dane wonders if teaching her how to release mana was a major turning point in her growth. It seems this is true. As we peek into Lila's thoughts, we find out that she feels grateful to him. Thanks to his guidance, she learned the basics of handling magic much faster than others her age, and she has even formed 2 mana cores now. She has waited so long for this day, and if she wins, she wonders if Dane would feel bad about it. The servant finally brings the requested equipment. Once Dane is equipped with a practice spear, he swings it for a moment to get the blood flowing in his muscles. After that, he takes his stance and asks if she's ready. Layla confirms that she is and takes her stance with a practice sword. She reflects on how she was able to fight a spear wielder in the Danter Cup, and he wasn't that hard to handle. Given that the spear is a long-range weapon, its effectiveness decreases rapidly as the distance closes. With that in mind, Layla recklessly lunges at Dane to attack him, but before she can even touch him with her sword, Dane disappears, leaving her bewildered. Before she can figure out where he went, she realizes that Dane has already tagged her with his spear, ending the practice match before it even began. She quickly turns around and asks him, since when was he there? Dane reminds her that she should consider herself lucky that they were using practice weapons. If they had been real weapons, she could have been in real trouble. Layla refuses to believe she lost, because she's sure her sword had already reached him. Dane offers her another round, but he warns her that the same method won't work a second time, so she'd better move carefully. Layla tries to steel herself, internally admitting that the fact she just lost was simply because she was nervous since she hadn't seen him in a long time. This time, she vows she won't give him any breathing room. It's then that Layla sees her father standing on the balcony, watching everything unfold. Dane also notices the Duke and is surprised to see him there, just to observe his daughter's potential firsthand. He can understand the intentions of this doting father very well. After she won the Danter Cup, he must be worried about his daughter, who has been working so hard, but Dane is sure that this match will ease the Duke's worries as he will witness her true potential. Layla feels even more motivated by her father's presence and is eager to prove herself, giving it her all in this final match. Dane nods in acknowledgement and tells her to show him everything she's got. As the battle begins, the exchange of blows between the two reaches an incredible speed. This time, Layla is giving it her all, but despite all her efforts, Dane points out that she's still lacking a little, encouraging her to push harder. The Duke can't help but chuckle to himself, feeling proud of his daughter. He's glad to see that in this competition they seem to be evenly matched so far. But he's curious about how it's all going to end. But suddenly something changes. A strange and ominous feeling takes over the air. And he notices that the confident smile Dane had just moments ago has disappeared, replaced by a serious expression that makes him look like a warrior ready for battle. Well, it seems Duke is experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder because everything about our boy seems strangely familiar to him. As their duel continues, Layla gives her all to defeat Dane, but it's clear she's no match for him. Her next clumsy move leaves her completely exposed, and Dane quickly trips her, making sure the fall isn't too hard. Duke Termion doesn't seem thrilled to see his daughter on a losing streak. He asks his knight Asmar if he thinks Layla's arrogance will be tempered after this, but Asmar believes that Termion already knows what's happening. So he doesn't think his opinion is necessary. It's not, Termion agrees, saying that he knows better than anyone, since he saw the signs before the Dante Cup. But after her victory, she changed completely. Meanwhile, the fight continues as the Duke points out that he had thought about having a serious talk with her, but he thought it would be better if she figured it out for herself. Asmar also agrees with this idea. Then Termion questions his knight again, asking him how many manicores Dane might have inside him, considering Dane's talent. The knight estimates at least 3, but Termion immediately disagrees, thinking it's probably 2.1, with a very small chance of it being 3. Asmar asks the reason behind the Duke's words. In response, Termion tells his knight to take a closer look at what's overwhelming Layla. It's not Dane's spear skill, nor his superior speed. It's his tactical movements, something Layla has never experienced before. Then we zoom in on Layla, who is completely bewildered about how Dane is countering every move she throws. To clarify, Dane points out that her slow movements are making it easy for him to predict her actions. All her attacks are too predictable, giving him the upper hand. Meanwhile, Termion asks Asmar if he can't see the spirit of an experienced swordsman in Dane. The knight agrees immediately, but admits he's curious about how, at his age, he could have so much experience. Termion confesses he's just as lost, then reflects on how Layla's greatest growth happened 7 years ago, after they returned from the inspection tour of the South. Meeting Dane back then had a profound impact on her, and he's sure this time will be no different. Asmar acknowledges this, and admits he's also surprised by this kid. The young lady may be the winner of the Dante Cup, but Dane far surpasses her. It certainly seems that Count Sogres must have trained him harshly. However, Duke Termion doesn't see it that way. On the contrary, he believes Sogres isn't the type to train someone harshly, and besides, Dane doesn't seem like someone who needs such training in the first place. Asmar isn't entirely sure where the Duke is going with this, so Termion clarifies it. He states that this kid is no ordinary person, he's someone with overwhelming talent, a true genius, also speculating that Dane probably didn't participate in the Dante Cup simply because he wasn't interested. Although Asmar outwardly agrees with his superior's assessment, inwardly he finds the idea ridiculous. The Dante Cup is something every boy and girl in the Empire aspires to win. Why wouldn't Dane be interested in it? Hermione continues to remind her knight that no one Dane's age has skills even remotely on his level, Just as the fool says this, his daughter is bent over in exhaustion. Watching her, Termion reflects that these battles might be exactly what she needs to humble her personality a bit. He hopes that Layla will realize her shortcomings from this sparring session. If she can let go of her arrogance and focus on becoming more skilled with a sword, she will be able to completely surpass her brothers. Now, let's switch to Layla's perspective, where she's facing one humiliating defeat after another. She's finally starting to realize that Dane isn't just a tough opponent. He's on a completely different level. She always knew their talents were different, but discovering that the gap between them is so huge is a stunning moment for her. Seeing that she's exhausted, Dane decides to call it a day. It seems Dane was simply doing what Duke Termion had hoped, playing along to remind Layla that no, she isn't the best. As they walk, she is visibly upset and explodes at him, demanding to know how the hell he trained to get so good. In response, Dane casually replies that he just practiced diligently. What a savage. His nonchalant answer completely baffles Layla, who can't help but feel frustrated. She thinks he's trying to undermine all the effort she's put into her own training, as if to say that Layla, hasn't worked just as hard. Dane, ever the savage, replies again and tells Layla she just has to work harder. With that, he decides to leave, but Layla isn't one to give up. She makes it clear that she won't lose next time. Dane, already looking forward to their next match, doesn't say much and leaves her to ponder their dynamic. To Layla, Dane is the only person her age she truly admires, but at the same time, he's also someone she desperately wants to surpass. She wants to prove she's not just a girl waiting to be taught. However, no matter how hard she tries, he always seems to be beyond her reach. Still, she tells herself to just wait and see next time she's going to win. A few days pass, and we learn that the Imperial Academy's entrance exam is more than just a test. It's a full-blown festival. Talented people from all corners of the Empire flock to the capital, bringing their families and entourages. This results in thousands of people arriving in the capital at the same time. This year, around 6,000 applicants signed up for the exam. There were no prerequisites other than paying the exam fee, making it accessible to anyone. However, the competition was fierce, with almost 2/3 of the applicants failing the first test. Now, with the pre-screening finished, 2,000 applicants are left preparing for the next challenge, in the form of the specialization exam. Inside the academy, the bigwigs gather to discuss the influx of applicants this year. More than 2,000 students passed the first test, so things are going to get busy. One of them asks, how many will pass this time? And a lady confidently replies, 200 at most. Everyone speculates on the type of students who will make it. The man leading the conversation is Professor Denabo, Dean of the Magic Department. The lady speaking is Ingrid, Dean of the Swordsmanship Department. Denabo asks when the exam results will be released, admitting he's curious to know who took first place. Someone casually mentions that the top spot in swordsmanship will probably be the young lady from House Termion. After all, she is the winner of the Danter Cup, and no one questions the exceptional way Duke Termion has raised his children. The conversation continues with the Dean of the Summoning Department, Delphin, a sharp lady with glasses, and the professor sitting next to her is Sternad, the Dean of the Swordsmanship Department. While everyone makes guesses about who's going to be the top student, Denabo sits silently. It's then that he interrupts the chatter, calling everyone out on their wild assumptions. He pulls out a letter that draws all eyes to him. When they ask him what it is, Denabo explains that it's a letter of recommendation from Sidrain, and that it even bears the mana-imbued seal of the Nixon Magic Tower. Everyone is flabbergasted. Of all the years, Sidrain has finally recommended someone he believes is worthy. The room is filled with disbelief, yet some insist there's no way this person could surpass the winner of the Danter Cup. However, Denabo isn't finished. He reminds everyone that Sidrain, who is famous for never taking on a disciple, has indeed sent a letter of recommendation, but that the kid in question is only 14 years old and is already a third circle mage. At this point, everyone is eager to know who this prodigy could be. Denabo lets the uncertainty build before finally revealing the name. Dane Sogres, from House Sogres. The room is stunned into silence. What makes this revelation even more astonishing is the fact that there are already 2 geniuses from House Sogres enrolled in the academy, and now there will be a 3rd. They are sure this is definitely going to catch everyone's attention. Sternad recalls that House Sogres is famous for its expertise in spearsmanship, but a recommendation letter from a mage doesn't really make sense. It seems Sogres is about to become famous for their magic instead. Ingrid shares the same thoughts. She had assumed he would apply for swordsmanship, so this is a surprising turn of events. Denabo, on the other hand, is excited to see him join the magic department with his sister, the beauty already there. He will be a fantastic addition to make the department even better. After all, the Imperial Academy is best known for its magic. Suddenly, a lady bursts into the meeting to announce that the exam results have arrived. A system window showing the results appears, revealing that the swordsmanship department has admitted 1,367 students, the magic department 227, and the summoning department only 152. The numbers for the fencing department are astonishing, especially compared to the other departments, leaving everyone present impressed. Esternet feels satisfied, pleased with the large number of candidates joining his department. He is sure that our boy must be one of them too. Each professor quickly checks the results, eager to see which department Dane ended up in, but to everyone's dismay, his name doesn't appear in any of the departments. An old man in the room asks the reporter if there are any applicants who aren't listed. The reporter quickly replies that there is 1 application for the autonomous program. The mention of the autonomous program leaves everyone with surprised faces. Then, the reporter drops another bombshell. Apparently, Dane Sogres got the highest score on the first test among 6,000 applicants. Once again, this news leaves everyone astonished, and one of them shouts in disbelief at the top of his lungs. Later, we meet Dane. A month has already passed since he arrived at the academy. Time has flown by, and it feels like his training session with Layla was just yesterday. However, here they are, having already taken the first test and now waiting for the results. Fortunately, the exam wasn't too difficult. That's when Layla comes running up to him, anxious to see the results. She can't wait to find out how he did. Well, we already know he got first place, which is not surprising to us, but it's a huge defeat for Layla, who is Dane's rival. She can't hide her frustration upon realizing she's been outdone. Again, Dane, on the other hand, feels immensely satisfied seeing her defeated face once more. After all, he's determined to humiliate this sassy cat who thinks she's entitled to be the top student, Layla. Still furious, she demands to know how he managed to study so well. Dane replies that he focused on past exam questions his sister had sent him. He adds that, even with that, it was still a challenge, especially the military science section. Still, Dane had an advantage, especially since military science is something he has personally experienced on the battlefield in his past life. Layla, however, can't understand why 14-year-olds are tested on war strategies and military policy. Dane just rubs salt in her wounds by casually stating that he found it fun. This sets Layla off, leaving her with an even more dramatic reaction. She glares at him and asks if he hit his head or something. As far as she's concerned, military science, the arts, music, and even the history of the Drenic Empire are things a 14-year-old should be clueless about, but Dane, in his usual savage style, responds. He reminds her that this is his specialty. After all, he has learned many things while living on the battlefield. Layla then questions Dane about what he chose for the second test. To her surprise, he says he chose 3. It's the mention of 3 that catches her completely off guard, because apparently it means he applied for major autonomy. With each new revelation about Dane, her agitation grows. She demands to know what other talents he's hiding, besides the spear and summoning magic. Dane simply smirks and avoids her question, but promises to tell her soon. Frustrated, she insists he tell her immediately and asks why the hell he chose the autonomous major. No matter how she looks at it, she just can't understand his decision. Dane replies calmly, saying it's because he wants to study all of them. Layla immediately reminds him that the pass rate for the autonomous major is terrible. Dane is unfazed and reveals that he heard students in the autonomous major can take any class they want until graduation, plus they don't have to declare a specific major, and can even conduct research with professors from all different departments. Lila narrows her eyes and asks if he really thinks people fail just because they don't know about those benefits, then even speculates if he's doing this because he doesn't want to be in the same department as her. Dane denies having any such intentions, which only prompts her to lash out again. She demands to know how he plans to pass and insists on finding out what other skills he has besides spearmanship and summoning magic. Seeing how restless and persistent she is, Dane briefly considers revealing more for a moment. Honestly, I find her pretty annoying. I hope she talks less. The scene shifts to the academy, where we hear professors talking about Dane. Apparently, all the professors had to gather in one place, because to pass the autonomous major exam, the student must succeed in the exams of 3 subject departments. They are confused by the fact that Dane actually plans to take on the autonomous major, swordsmanship, magic, and summoning. The core principles of each field are practically opposites, which makes it almost impossible to pass all 3. Professor Delphina points out that although there have been people who managed to pass 2 tests for the autonomous degree, most don't even pass 1. Denabo agrees, adding that it's better to specialize, to focus on the spear if it's spearmanship, or on magic if it's magic. Applying for just one major is the safest and smartest option: people. It's been 200 years since the autonomous degree was created, and almost no one has managed to pass all its tests. Back then, when the major was first established, the requirements weren't as strict. Hundreds of years ago, during times of conquest, the academy needed all the talent it could get. If someone showed potential, regardless of the field, they were trained and utilized. But it's not like that anymore. The requirements have become more and more demanding over time. Applicants now prefer to excel in one skill rather than be mediocre in several. One of the professors then questions why this major even exists, especially since it's a department no one applies to or passes. Denables reminds them that it's a symbol, a mark of prestige reserved only for the best talents in the empire. Delphina points out that it's not that important anymore. It has diminished to the point where it practically exists in name only. Denabo adds that he checked the records and found that in the last 1,000 years, only 2 people have passed. One dropped out and the other was the previous emperor. Hearing this, Professor Ingrid points out that unless someone is a true genius, even passing the autonomous major is impossible. Delphina then points that out, that since Dane is the youngest son of the war hero, Alfonso Logres, and doesn't come from an ordinary house, she admits she's eager to see what he can do. The professors also contemplate the possibility that Dane might just be an arrogant youth if they are lenient with him. There's a chance he might somehow pass, but with their positions as professors, they can't afford to do things half-heartedly. Whatever the case, Denabo is intrigued whether Dane is a punk filled with so much confidence that he would dare to challenge a symbol of the academy. He wants to see it for himself. Finally, the time has come and we find ourselves at the location of the second exam. As Dane stands before the professors, he introduces himself by name and says he applied for the Imperial Academy's autonomous course program. Denabo asks him if he understands the importance of applying to the autonomous course. Of course, Dane has done his homework. He confidently states that he is fully aware of the obligation to pass the exams for the 3 majors he selected. Professor Ingrid then reminds him that it's not too late to back out. She truly respects Count Sogres, the Empire's greatest man-at-arms, and doesn't want to see the son of such a notable figure fail and have to return home in disgrace. Dane acknowledges her concern and even expresses his gratitude for it. However, he makes it clear that he came here with the determination to give it his all. The professors expected no less. After all, if Dane were someone who would give up after hearing a few words of discouragement, he wouldn't have applied in the first place. With that in mind, Denabo states that the exam will consist of 3 different tests related to the specializations Dane has chosen. If he fails even one of them, it will be an automatic fail. Guaranteed. Now that the rules are set, Denabo gestures to the head of the summoning department, Professor Delphinizo, to begin the test. Next, she positions herself right in front of Dane. As they face each other, Dane reflects on Delphinizo's reputation. As he's heard, she has reached the peak among the summoners of the Alteon Empire and holds the record for summoning 3 summons above the 2nd rank at the same time. Finally, the lady speaks and explains that the summoning test is simple. Dane will need to satisfy her in any way he can with his summoning skills. Hearing this, Dane is thrilled. He had hoped the test would be a freestyle challenge, without a strict form or standards. Instead of showing her a flashy magic trick, as she might expect, he asks if she could summon something. His request takes her by surprise. She quickly demands to know what the hell he's talking about. Even the professors are bewildered. It's inconceivable that an applicant would ask a professor to perform a summon. This also piques his curiosity about what Dane is thinking and planning. Since he doesn't have a mark, Denabo had assumed that Dane would talk about the theory behind summoning, but now he speculates that Dane might be using this opportunity to witness a real summoning. Although Delphinizo doesn't like this brat giving her orders, she is willing to comply with his request. However, she makes it clear that this isn't something he can see often, so he'd better keep his eyes wide open. With that, the lady. She begins her summoning magic, and as the massive spell takes shape, everything around her starts to scatter from the intense pressure. Even the professors are amazed when they finally see the beast she summons, known as the Mad Summon. A terrifying roar from the monster is enough to make everyone question their life choices. According to Dane, this creature is the fiercest among third-rank summons and is famous for attacking anyone it sees, aside from its summoner. Dane, honestly, didn't expect to witness something like this, considering this is just the entrance exam, but now it seems things are about to get a little more interesting. Now that she has done what he demanded, Delphina tells Dane to show her whatever he was planning to do. The spectators of the test are also astonished, because even among fourth-tier creatures, the Eterarch is the fiercest. Even if several dual-class knights were to attack it at once, they would struggle to defeat it. Even Professor Ingrid has no idea why Delphina summoned something as massive as this. Meanwhile, Dane just keeps moving forward toward the monster, which causes Delphina to panic. She quickly warns him to get away immediately, because if he gets too close, it's clear the beast will attack. But Dane ignores the warning, and after getting dangerously close to the monster, he simply says he's just trying to prove his capabilities as a summoner. Delphina acknowledges this, but she didn't tell him he had to jump into the fire to prove himself. But Dane simply extends his hand, reassuring her that she doesn't have to worry about it. With an authoritative gesture and a few words exchanged with the beast, this giant monster that had once seemed so terrifying suddenly bows down, behaving like a docile pet and submitting to Dane's command. This is an absolutely stunning moment for everyone, as Dane continues to pet the terrifying creature as if it were a stray cat. The monster's owner, Delphina, reacts just like everyone else. You see, there's no way to tame the ferocious Eterarch so easily. That's when she suddenly notices the mana thread connected to the Eterarch. Although the color is faint, and it's not a complete subjugation, it completely erases the Eterarch's hostility. What they are witnessing is happening right before their eyes, but they still can't quite believe it. Delphina wonders if Dane analyzed the mana thread in an instant as he approached the Eterarch, then created a similar mana thread to connect to it himself. Since Dane doesn't have a mark, that would be the best method for him as a summoner. She realizes that what this guy has is an incredible talent, something that even surpassed the praise she received from her own masters long ago. With such a gift, she wonders how great his future will be. Finally, she steps forward and reminds Dane that this is more than enough to assess his abilities. She praises him for his strong courage, calm judgment, and solid fundamentals before officially giving him a pass. This is truly impressive for the other two professors, a rare sight they don't see often. Later that night, when Dane returns to Duke Termion's palace, he tells Layla about his experience. She is absolutely astonished to hear that the test ended in just 20 minutes. No, 5 minutes. As much as she hates to admit it, she reluctantly acknowledges that with this achievement, he is now the top student. But Dane quickly reminds her that she is the one who got first place in the swordsmanship department, so technically, she is also an outstanding student, of course. Layla refuses to accept the title for obvious reasons, and all she can do is sulk in frustration. Dane tries to cheer her up, reminding her that even her father threw a party to congratulate her for passing, but Layla just can't get over the fact that the talent gap between her and Dane is immensely large. To her, Dane feels less like a rival and more like an unstoppable natural disaster. Eventually, she walks away without saying anything. Later, Dane comes face to face with the Duke. Termion, who advises him to leave her alone, saying she wants space, but Dane thinks that letting her sulk might not be the best for her. However, the Duke reassures him, saying there is nothing to worry about, since Layla will get over it in time. The Duke then changes the subject, asking if he has informed his father about his success in the test. He is sure that Count Sogres would be incredibly proud to hear the news. Our boy confirms this, revealing that everyone at home was really very happy. The Duke smiles and reminds Dane that getting into the autonomous department is no small feat. He mentions how even those at the academy were surprised by Dane's achievement. Now that the exams are over, the Duke advises him to rest and prepare for enrollment. Dane thanks the Duke for his care and guidance. Termion then brings up another matter, asking if Dane has thought about what he plans to forge. Our boy replies that he is considering making a sword, though he hasn't quite decided yet. When the Duke asks him why he is hesitating, Dane explains that his body has not fully matured yet. Plus, he is not entirely sure what kind of sword he wants. He plans to take his time and think carefully before placing his order, since this is an opportunity he simply cannot waste. Termion is amused to hear this. Suddenly, the butler appears and informs the Duke that the lady wishes to see him. With that, he walks away, leaving Dane to reflect on how the Duchess's illness has not changed and has been the same for 2 years. Just then, Layla appears unexpectedly and shares that fortunately her mother has not gotten worse, but she has not gotten better either. It has been the same for a few years. Dane feels sorry for her, especially since he has never seen a family member so sick. He does not dare to say that he understands how Layla feels about it. 2 days later, we find ourselves back at the academy. The host greets all the first-year students of the Imperial Academy and introduces himself as the headmaster of the academy, Archwell Casus. He praises the new students who have reached this prestigious position after enduring fierce competition. He believes that the future of the Empire is very bright and that everyone here is a talent of the Empire. Among the new students this year, it seems there are many particularly outstanding ones, but there is also an extraordinary student among those outstanding individuals, someone who passed the autonomous major exam. As for this qualification, only 2 people have passed it in the last 100 years. The student in question passed the autonomous major exam by receiving the unanimous approval of the 3 deans from the magic, spearmanship, and summoning departments. Everyone goes absolutely wild hearing that someone passed the autonomous major exam, something they could barely imagine. The director then calls the top student, Dane Sogres, to come forward. Dane walks to the stage in style as the crowd goes wild, astonished that this young brat is the one who passed the autonomous major exam. Everyone in the crowd is talking about Dane and his family, and among them is the Count of Sogres himself, accompanied by other family members. Duke Termion, who is nearby, is quite impressed as he congratulates Sogres for creating such an extraordinary child. Boy, he feels disappointed in himself, thinking he has achieved absolutely nothing after raising 2 sons. His daughter is entering the academy, but neither of his sons bothers to show up. The eldest is on a mission and the second one ran away. On the other hand, Sogres has it all together with his 2 daughters, and Termion can't help but feel a little envious. Looking at his daughter, he feels quite dejected and sad and regrets that her mother couldn't be here to witness her special day. While Dane is in the spotlight, all eyes are fixed on him. Delfinazo quickly asks Dane's sister if Dane has always gotten along well with his summons since he was young. His sister replies quickly and positively, as if the answer was obvious. Delfinazo had expected this answer and is now even more certain that Dane has an innate kindness, something he has likely had since birth. Delfinazo reflects on the situation, thinking that Dane is a rare case. He's much better than most summoners, despite having no visible sign of a summit. The sister then wonders aloud if Dane's high level of kindness would allow him to summon creatures from beyond the horizon. To understand this question, you need a little context. Beyond the horizon refers to another world, one from which summons were once made. The link to that world was lost over 100 years ago. Delfinazo finally concludes that it's possible. He believes the summons from that world have the ability to choose their summoners, which could make such a feat more than achievable. Meanwhile, the director approaches Dane, finally coming face to face with him. He hands our boy a paper while expressing his high expectations that this extraordinary student will demonstrate all of his talents at the academy. Dane proudly grabs the paper and acknowledges it with a smile. Meanwhile, all the scattered students gather and form a line for the oath ceremony, led by the first-year representative. Later, we see Dane completely lost in his own pleasant thoughts, basking in the glow of his first great moment of achievement. He has finally arrived at the academy. It took quite a bit of time and effort to get here, but he's determined not to waste this second chance at life. This is just the beginning, and he's ready to achieve much more. Next, the following scene takes us to the academy's main auditorium. A few representatives conclude their introductory speeches about the academy, and the students have a short break before the next scheduled activity. They are invited to grab some snacks prepared at the back and rest comfortably during the break. Lila, acting like a worried wife, starts to lecture Dane. She warns him that now with his success, many people will be watching him, some with good intentions, others with bad. She advises him to be careful with any offers and to think things through. As she continues to talk, Dane dismisses her concerns, insisting that he already knows how to handle himself. But Lila doesn't stop. She brings up the topic of clubs, reminding him of their importance. Dane, however, makes it clear that he's not interested in any of them. By this point, the upperclassmen have already started scouting for talented freshmen, hoping to recruit them for their clubs and activities. Now that he thinks about it, Dane remembers his older sister mentioning that there are a bunch of fun clubs at the academy. Suddenly, an enthusiastic student shouts Dane's name to recruit him for their club. In no time, a crowd forms and everyone rushes towards Dane, shouting over each other for him to join their club. In a matter of minutes, the scene becomes chaotic, but Lila quickly grabs Dane's hand and makes a run for it, dragging him along as she flees the chaos. Unfortunately, their escape route is blocked by some idiots who are just as desperate to recruit Dane for their club. The whole place descends into chaos. The students are screaming, promoting their clubs with wild enthusiasm, while Lila runs as if her life depends on it, with Dane in tow. Despite her speed, the crowd is relentless and starts to chase them. Dane, while running, can't help but think how familiar this feels. Sure, he's used to being chased by enemy soldiers, but being chased like this just for being the top student is something unique. The scene shifts to another part of the academy, where we meet Celtus Redfield. He's walking calmly, minding his own business. In the background, a group of older students are whispering among themselves, looking at Celtus. It's clear he has a reputation, but what kind? We're about to find out. Apparently, Celtus has returned from his post as the commander of the Imperial Knights,